The Senate will come to order. Please rise for the invocation to be delivered by Pastor Jim Harris of Tilden Baptist Church in Tilden, Texas. Pastor.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful day. You alone have created it, and we shall rejoice and be glad in it. We praise you, Lord, that our forefathers had the faith in you and the courage to act boldly in 1836 when they established the Republic of Texas and when you granted victory to those proud patriots and citizens at San Jacinto. Father, we humbly come before you asking for your wisdom and guidance to lead the men and women of the Texas Senate, who you have called to be your servants in this 89th legislature. May each member of this assembly deal with all matters that come before them in a spirit of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. We pray that you bless these leaders of our great Lone Star State, their families, their staff, Governor Patrick, Secretary Spall, and the leaders of this group as a whole. Lord, we also ask your blessing upon those that mourn the loss of Pope Francis, and we pray your provision for the new leader of that church. Lord, we thank you for your unending grace and mercy. It is in the mighty, majestic, and sovereign name of Jesus Christ I pray. Amen.
Amen. Pastor, thank you, Pastor Harris. Chair recognizes Senator Zaffarani.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, today's inspiring prayer was led by my constituent, Pastor Jim Harris of Tilden Baptist Church. He has led his congregation of 100 since 2022, and he's proud that he had a full house on Easter Sunday. Being a pastor actually is his second career. He worked as an agricultural teacher and advisor at McMullen County High School for 38 years. I met him when I first campaigned in Tilden, McMullen County for the state Senate, and we have been friends ever since. Today, he honors us with his presence. Although he is also celebrating his retirement as an agricultural teacher, his colleagues gave him a rocking chair because they said he rocked his career and they hope he rocks in retirement. Pastor, thank you for your beautiful and inspiring prayer and for inspiring us to be our best. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Members, could you greet our pastor upon his retirement, please? Mr. Doorkeeper.
Mr. President, there's a message from the House.
Admit the messenger.
Mr. President, I am directed by the House to inform the Senate that the House has taken the following action. The House is...
We're happy to see you this morning. The following message from the governor, the secretary will read the message.
To the Senate of the 89th Legislature, regular session, I ask the advice, consent, and confirmation of the Senate with respect to the following appointments. To be members of the Coastal Water Authority Board of Directors: John M. Mark Sogeler, Dayton; Hannah E. Kaplan, Houston; Antonio L. Santana, Mount Bellevue. Respectfully submitted, Greg Abbott, Governor of Texas. To nominations.
Members, could we have some order on the floor? About ready to start the resolutions. The chair lays out the following resolution. The secretary will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 434 by Gutierrez, Menendez, and Zaffirini. Whereas Goodwill Industries of San Antonio is celebrating its 80th anniversary in 2025, providing a fitting opportunity to recognize the organization for its myriad contributions. And whereas Goodwill San Antonio traces its origins to 1945, when it was launched amid the city's post-World War II rebuilding efforts. Founded by a group of prominent business, religious, and civic leaders, the organization began with an initial investment goal of $25,000 and a commitment to provide workforce development opportunities to individuals facing employment barriers. Its first store opened on the city's south side in 1946, and 18 of its 22 employees were Purple Heart War veterans. And whereas over the past 8 decades, Goodwill San Antonio has become one of the largest and most highly regarded workforce development training providers in Southwest Texas. With more than 1,800 employees, it serves a 24-county region and operates locations in San Antonio, Kerrville, Laredo, New Braunfels, Seguin, Bulverde, and Cibolo. And whereas Goodwill San Antonio provides thousands of area residents with access to gainful employment, career training, and job procurement services, while placing a special emphasis on assisting those encountering hiring obstacles, such as prior incarceration, disabilities, or a lack of formal education. Serving as a second-chance employer, the organization offers life-changing opportunities to those who are facing barriers to employment. And whereas revenue generated by Goodwill San Antonio's retail stores and contract service operations are reinvested into its many mission-driven programs, creating a cycle of economic opportunity and community benefit. Among other initiatives, the organization has established the Goodwill Academy and Career Services vocational training program to help prepare individuals for jobs in such high-demand industries as healthcare, manufacturing, logistics, and skilled trades. And whereas for 80 years, Goodwill San Antonio has played an important role in numerous South Texas communities, changing lives through the power of work and equipping individuals with the tools they need to reach their full potential as engaged and productive members of society. Now therefore be it resolved that the Senate of the 89th Texas Legislature hereby commemorate the 80th anniversary of Goodwill Industries of San Antonio and extend to all those associated with the organization sincere best wishes for the future.
The chair recognizes Senator Gutierrez on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, thank you for this opportunity to honor my friends at Goodwill in San Antonio. I'd like to welcome the constituents of ours, and I say ours because it's also Senator Zaffirini knows the value of Goodwill. Senator Menendez knows the value of Goodwill in San Antonio, as well as Senator Campbell. We filed SR 434 in honor of Goodwill of San Antonio, celebrating 8 decades now of investing in their community and dedicating resources to provide workforce development. When you think of Goodwill in San Antonio, you think of the store that you go out and buy some thrift clothes, but you don't see what's behind that. You don't see all of the help that they're helping people every day in providing job training, in providing the same Dress for Success outfits for those same people, the access to gainful employment, the career training, the job procurement services. This outstanding organization offers life-changing opportunities to those who face barriers to employment. Goodwill San Antonio has played a role in numerous South Texas communities as well, beyond our San Antonio community. And so I wanted to thank them for being here today, thank them for letting them honor us today. I wanted to welcome their president and CEO, Carlos Contreras, who's I've known since I was a little boy. Just a wonderful, wonderful friend of my family. Robert, Bo Davis, Bo, thank you for being here today. The board chair of Goodwill San Antonio. Diana Trevino, thank you, Diana, for being here as a staff attorney for Goodwill. And Clyde Mitchell. Clyde is our maintenance supervisor for Goodwill San Antonio. Clyde, thank you for being here. Welcome to your state's capital. And with that, I move adoption, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator Menendez on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to thank Senator Gutierrez for bringing forward Senate Resolution 434 and to welcome our friends from San Antonio. Carlos, thank you for bringing such a great group. I know you brought your board chair, but and no disrespect at all, but I was so impressed with the staff members. The longest serving employee, team associate of Goodwill, was it 38 years that I heard? My gosh, you started in grade school or something like that. I was so impressed. Thank you for what you do. And then, sir, everything you do to make sure that our community is clean and pretty and so many things that we take for granted. So many times you drive by somewhere and you just don't think about the work and the effort that it took to get it to where it is. And I want to thank your board chair for the work that the board does to help you raise the revenue, raise the funds, do the things to make sure that everyday Texans know that they can have a place, no matter what their circumstances, to get trained for a job, to have that dignity of being able to take care of themselves and their families. So many things that we deal with here in this Texas Senate lately, it seems like it's been having to do with the outcomes of not investing in our community. And Goodwill, you've done such good work to help our state and our nation, and particularly those of you who are working in San Antonio, helping people get those second chance jobs and jobs where maybe no one else would employ them. Thank you for what your work. Thank you for everything you do. Senator Gutierrez, thank you for recognizing this incredible institution. Sometimes we take it for granted. We just think of it, like you said, as a thrift store, but we don't think about all of the incredible training that goes on and all of the good things that you do in the community. So it's an honor to recognize you and to welcome you to our Texas Senate. Mr. President, when the time is appropriate, I'd like to move all members' names added to the resolution as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Menendez moves to add all senators' names to the resolution. Is there objection? Seeing none, motion adopted. Senator Zaffirini, you're recognized on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, members, it is my pleasure to join Senators Gutierrez and Menendez of San Antonio in praising and honoring these wonderful people from Goodwill Industries of San Antonio. Because I represent part of Bexar County, the rural part of Bexar County, I'm keenly aware of their leadership and their excellent work, not only for the residents of San Antonio, but for the entire county, including my constituents. You do such excellent work, and you always reflect your commitment, your compassion, and your interest in making our community a better place for even more people, and you offer opportunities that they otherwise would not enjoy. Thank you for that leadership and for that commitment. Above all, thank you for working so hard to make a difference. You honor us with our presence today. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Chair recognizes Senator Gutierrez to close on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe we also have some people up from Goodwill up all over. If I can get you all to stand up, there you are. Please stand up. These are all the volunteers and helpers at Goodwill. I want to thank you and welcome to your state's capital. Thank you for all your good hard work in this community. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I move adoption.
Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution? The chair hears none. The resolution is adopted. Thank you, Senator Gutierrez. The chair recognizes Senator Zaffarini for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, it is my pleasure to recognize the delegation of leaders celebrating McMullen County Day at our state capitol. Established in 1877, McMullen County was named after its founder, John McMullen, an Irish land agent. Known for its strong ranching traditions, the county is home to the communities of Tilden and Callahan, and is one of the top producing areas in the Eagle Ford Shale. McMullen County remains a close-knit community that exemplifies rural resilience and embodies the values of hard work, self-reliance, and civic spirit. We do have a delegation in the North Gallery, and I'd like to introduce some of them and ask them to rise as I call their names. County Judge James Teal, County Attorney Kimberly Kreider-Dusick, Sheriff Emmett Shelton, County and District Clerk Maddie Martinez, County Tax Assessor Collector Bessie Guerrero, County Treasurer Jill Atkinson, County Commissioner Murray Swain, and earlier you heard from Pastor Jim Harris, who led us in such a beautiful and inspiring prayer. Will the entire delegation please rise and be welcomed to the Texas Senate? Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Just want to do a quick shout out to Cy-Fair ISD. They're all holding placards and thing. Give a wave to the third largest school district in the state. The chair recognizes Senator Gutierrez to introduce the Doctor of the Day.
Thank you, Mr. President. So many people that do watch us at work often ask me, what's this Doctor of the Day business? And I tell them, well, we sometimes get sick, Doc. We've had people have heart attacks in the hallway and on the floor. And so our Doctor of the Day is not just an honorary function, but necessary function. So I'm pleased to recognize Dr. Christine Ramos Camacho as our Doctor of the Day. Dr. Ramos Camacho is board-certified family medicine physician. She received her master's degree in molecular biology from the University of Texas at San Antonio, medical degree from San Juan Bautista School of Medicine in Puerto Rico. She then completed her residency training at the UT Health Science Center Family Medicine Residency Program, where she was awarded third-year Resident of the Year in 2021. During her residency, Dr. Camacho was actively involved in research on prediabetes, tobacco cessation, healthy literacy for immigrants, and COVID-19 provider wellness, projects that were presented and recognized at both state and national conferences. Growing up in Laredo, Texas, Dr. Camacho developed a deep appreciation for the people of South Texas and is passionate about primary care management, preventative medicine, which is so important to all of us, and caring for patients across all age groups. She now serves as faculty at the UT Health San Antonio Family Medicine Residency Program, where she continues to pursue opportunities in research and community engagement while also dedicating herself to the education of medical students and residents. I also want to mention Dr. August Ramos, who's assisting her today, and a medical student this week, Ileana Yap. The Texas Senate proudly recognizes Dr. Christine Ramos Camacho and honors her work with Senate Resolution 435. Thank you, Dr. Ramos. Dr. Camacho.
Members, if there's no objection, I would like to postpone the further reading and referral of bills to the end of today's calendar. Hearing no objection, so ordered. The chair lays out the following resolutions. The secretary will read the resolutions.
Senate Resolution 416 by Zaffarini et al. Senate Resolution 418 by Hancock. Senate Resolution 419 by Eckhart and Zaffarini. Senate Resolution 420 by Eckhart. Senate Resolution 421 by Birdwell. Senate Resolution 422 by Zaffarini. Senate Resolution 423 by Hinojosa of Nueces. Senate Resolution 425 by Eckhart. Senate Resolution 426 by Hinojosa of Nueces. Senate Resolution 427 by Campbell. Senate Resolution 431 by Hinojosa of Hidalgo. Senate Resolution 433 by Blanco. Senate Resolution 435 by Gutierrez. Senate Resolution 436 by Huffman. Senate Resolution 437 by Huffman. Senate Resolution 438 by Huffman. Senate Resolution 439 by Huffman. Senate Resolution 440 by Huffman. And Senate Resolution 441 by Kolkhorst.
Members, this is a voice vote. All in favor say aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it. The resolutions are adopted. Members, we're about ready to begin our calendar for the day. Senator Paxton is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1951.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members. I move to suspend the regular order of business and take up and consider Senate Bill 1951. This bill provides additional transparency and taxpayer notice requirements with respect to late rendition penalties and removes the 5% financial incentive for appraisal districts to impose such penalties. I move to suspend.
Senator Paxton moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1951. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betcourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 26 yeas and 5 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1951. The secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1951 relating to the imposition of a penalty for failure to timely file a rendition statement or property report with the chief appraiser of an appraisal district.
Senator Paxton is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Paxton moves passage to engrossment. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton.
There being 26 ayes and 5 nays, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Paxton is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Senator Paxton moves suspension of the 3-day rule. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton.
There being 26 ayes and 5 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1951. The secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 1951 relating to the imposition of a penalty for failure to timely file a rendition statement or property report with the chief appraiser of an appraisal district.
Senator Paxton is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage.
Senator Paxton moves final passage of Senate Bill 1951. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart,
There
Forrest.
being 26 ayes and 5 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Perry is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1261.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Senate Bill 1261 is GBRA debt terms. Specifically, it increases the ability to borrow money through the SWIFT programs from 30 to 40 years. With that, I move to suspend the regular order of business for committee substitute Senate Bill 1261.
Senator Perry moves to suspend the regular order of business on the committee substituted Senate Bill 1261. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading the committee substituted Senate Bill 1261. The secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1261 relating to the financing of water supply projects included in the state water plan.
Members, there is an amendment. Senator Perry is recognized on the amendment. Oh, certainly. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Perry.
Senator Perry, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment just renumbers the bill after a few changes were made through Ledge Council. Move adoption.
Senator Perry moves adoption of amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Perry, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage to engrossment.
Senator Perry moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Perry is recognized for a motion. Suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Senator Perry moves suspension of the 3-day rule. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook,
There
Creighton.
being 31 ayes and 0 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage Senate Bill 1261. Secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1261 relating to the financing of water supply projects included in the state water plan.
Senator Perry is recognized for a motion.
So moved.
Senator Perry moves final passage of the committee substitute of Senate Bill 1261. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton.
Being 31 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator. Senator Huffman is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1620.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I move to suspend the regular order of business, take up and consider the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1620. Members, forensic science plays an essential role in the criminal justice system, providing the scientific analysis and expert testimony needed for criminal investigations and trials. However, the forensic science profession faces a growing shortage of qualified forensic analysts, creating challenges for crime laboratories and hindering the timely delivery of justice. Recognizing this need, the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1620 directs the Office of Court Administration to establish the Texas Forensic Analyst Apprenticeship Pilot Program to address the growing need for forensic science professionals in the state and to collaborate with the Texas Forensic Science Commission to administer the program. To implement the program, OCA will enter into contracts with general academic teaching institutions that provide relevant training programs in forensic disciplines to meet the training needs of Texas forensic labs and publicly funded accredited crime labs awarded an apprentice position. These public crime labs may include local, municipal, or county labs or labs operated by the Department of Public Safety and the Texas Forensic Science Commission with OCA will be responsible for setting the requirements, awarding the position, entering into contracts, and consulting with the Texas Association of Crime Lab Directors to determine the current need. And they will work together to adopt rules. Members, this bill represents a proactive solution to address forensic workforce shortages in Texas, ensuring the continued delivery of reliable forensic evidence and improving the efficiency of the criminal justice system. And with that, I move suspension.
Senator Huffman moves suspension of the regular order of business on the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1620. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading, committee substitute to the Senate Bill 1620. The secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1620 relating to the establishment of the Texas Forensic Analyst Apprenticeship Pilot Program.
Members, there is an amendment. Senator Huffman, the secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 1 by Huffman.
Senator Huffman is recognized on floor amendment number 1.
Thank you, Mr. President. The floor amendment simply adds health science centers into the institutions that can be contracted with to engage in these programs. I move adoption.
Senator Huffman has moved adoption of floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Seeing none, so ordered. Senator Huffman is recognized for a motion.
I move passage to engrossment of committee substitute Senate Bill 1620.
Senator Huffman moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Huffman is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Huffman moves suspension of the 3-day rule. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 30 ayes and 1 nay, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading and final passage the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1620. The secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1620 relating to the establishment of the Texas Forensic Analyst Apprenticeship Pilot Program.
Senator Huffman is recognized for a motion.
Move final passage to the committee substitute Senate Bill 1620.
Senator Huffman moves final passage of the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1620. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart.
There being 30 ayes and 1 nay, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Huffman.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Sparks is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1530. Senate Bill 530.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move at this time to suspend the regular order of business in order to take up and consider Senate Bill 530. In 2019, the U.S. Department of Education amended federal rules to no longer require institutions of higher education to use their regional accreditor. However, there are parts of the code that still require Texas institutions of higher education to be accredited by their regional accreditor, the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. Senate Bill 530 simply cleans up Texas code to be in line with the federal rules and gives colleges and universities more freedom in which accreditor they use. With that, Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Sparks moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 530. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules, there is objection. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart,
There
Flores.
being 24 ayes and 7 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 530. The secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 530, relating the accreditation of certain post-secondary educational institutions in this state.
Senator Sparks is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Sparks moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Yes. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores.
There being 24 yeas and 7 nays, the bill is passed to engrossment. And we'll hold there at this point.
Thank you.
Senator Hinojosa is recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2183.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 2183. Senate Bill 2183 proposes amendments to the Texas Occupations Code to standardize the permitted sales periods for retail fireworks across the state. Standardized sales of fireworks are currently allowed for American Independence Day and New Year's Eve. Additionally, retailers along the Texas-Mexico border can sell fireworks during the celebrations of Cinco de Mayo. In certain counties, sales are also permitted for Texas Independence Day, San Jacinto Day, Memorial Day, and Diwali. This bill would extend the existing state-approved sales periods across Texas for all recognized sales periods. Ultimately, Senate Bill 2183 ensures consistent fireworks sales regulations throughout the state, allowing all permit holders to sell during currently authorized dates regardless of their location. And with that, Mr. President, I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Senator Adam Hinojosa moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2183. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton.
There being 25 yeas and 6 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 2183. Senator Adam Hinojosa is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President.
The secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2183, relating the periods during which a retail fireworks permit holder may sell fireworks to the public.
Senator Adam Hinojosa is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook.
I mean, 25 ayes and 6 nays, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Adam Hinojosa is recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Senator Adam Hinojosa moves suspension of the 3-day rule. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton.
Being 25 ayes and 6 nays, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on third reading the final passage, Senate Bill 2183. The secretary will read the caption.
Senate Bill 2183, relating the periods during which a retail fireworks permit holder may sell fireworks to the public.
Senator Adam Hinojosa is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of Senate Bill 2183.
Senator Adam Hinojosa moves final passage of Senate Bill 2183. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook, Creighton, Eckhart, Flores, Gutierrez.
There being 25 ayes and 6 nays, the bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator Adam Hinojosa.
Thank you, Mr.
Rocket's red
President.
glare, I guess, will rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Campbell, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2368.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business for committee substitute, Senate Bill 2368. This bill seeks to further strengthen the Lone Star Infrastructure Protection Act, a bill that passed both chambers unanimously in 2021. This bill strengthens the Lone Star Protection Act by establishing a penalty for each instance that a business entity that submits false or incomplete information to ERCOT. The bill also does cleanup in moving the Lone Star Protection Act from the Utilities Code into the Business and Commerce Code. Lastly, it allows the Texas Attorney General to conduct any investigation into the Lone Star Infrastructure Protection Act and report it to the PUC. With that, I move suspension.
Any objection? Hearing none. Rules suspended. Chair lays out second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2368. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2368 relating to affiliation with certain foreign entities of certain persons working or participating in the electricity market.
The following amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Campbell.
Senator Campbell, on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. The amendment was originally filed version of the bill, but it was inadvertently, Section 2 was inadvertently removed from the committee substitute. This amendment relates to hiring safeguards for prospective employees of ERCOT related to any travel or relationship they may have to a foreign government entity that's identified in the Lone Star Protection Act. And as I said briefly on my layout, it was also moved to the Business and Commerce Code.
Any objection to the amendment? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. You're recognized to move to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passes to engrossment. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you. I move suspension to the 3-day rule.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
31 ayes, no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2368. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2368 relating to affiliation with certain foreign entities of certain persons working or participating in the electricity market.
You're recognized on final.
So move. Final passage, please.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members.
Senator Swertner. Senator Swertner, you were here just a moment ago. We'll come back to you. Senator Colkhorst, you recognize committee substitute for Senate Bill 1398. Suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business and take up and consider at this time committee substitute to Senate Bill 1398. Members, Senate Bill 1398 is a refile of Senate Bill 1853 from the 88th session. It passed the Senate floor 31-0 and unfortunately ran out of time. Did not make it to the governor's desk. Like the bill from last session, committee substitute to Senate Bill 1398 addresses children without placement, which is CWOP, issues by limiting the ability for children to be ordered into CWOP status when an appropriate placement is available. It restricts the Department of Family and Protective Services or a community-based care provider from advocating for a CWOP placement. Let me just say that we've heard many stories over the years of children that were, and even judges or even caseworkers asking for a hotel placement. That was never the intent of CWOP. And like the bill from last session, committee substitute to Senate Bill 1398 adds family preservation, pre- and post-adoption services, and extended foster care, known as independent living services, as services in CBC, community-based care. Members, there are a couple of things that we've added to this bill. That's CBC transparency. It adds a requirement to the CBC implementation plan to require information be posted on the DFPS website so that we'll know better how the SSCCs are performing. And so members, with that, I'm very pleased with this bill. I think it's got some common sense provisions. So I move suspension of the regular order of business, Mr. President, if there are no questions.
I would expect you to be pleased with your bill.
I am pleased with this bill.
Any
Mr.
objection? Hearing none, rules suspended. Chair lays out second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1398. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1398 relating to certain procedures in a suit affecting the parent-child relationship for a child placed in the conservatorship of the Department of Family and Protective Services.
You recognize the passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage of to engrossment of committee substitute.
Any objection? Hearing none. Bill passed to engrossment. You recognize to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. Rules suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 1398. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1398 relating to certain procedures in a suit affecting the parent-child relationship for a child placed in the conservatorship of the Department of Family and Protective Services.
You're recognized on final.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of committee substitute to Senate Bill 1398.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. Bill is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Swertner, you're recognized on Senate Bill 1960 to suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, Mr. President, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider at this time Senate Bill 1960. Members, during the interim, the Business and Commerce Committee was tasked with considering changes to state law that would protect Texas's creative industries from unauthorized uses by artificial intelligence. This bill, Senate Bill 1960, comes from those discussions and a need to update existing copyright law with the advent of generative AI in content creation. Sophisticated digital replicas can mimic an individual's voice or visual likeness, making detection difficult and leaving a person vulnerable to exploitation without their consent. This bill establishes an individual's voice or visual likeness as a property right and enables the individual or other applicable right holder to authorize its use. The bill prohibits unauthorized digital replicas from being produced or commercialized without written consent. There's also a renewable provision allowing the right holder to apply with the Secretary of State for 5-year extensions if they can demonstrate regular public use of the individual's voice or visual likeness in the 2 years prior to expiration. And finally, under this bill, individuals can take action against bad actors who knowingly create, distribute, or profit from unauthorized digital copies of their likeness. This bill is a positive step towards ensuring that core rights are protected while still allowing innovation and creativity to flourish. Thank you, members. Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, rules of suspension lays out in second reading. Senate Bill 1960. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 1960, relating to the digital replication rights in the voice and visual likeness of individuals.
You're recognized on pass to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment of Senate Bill 1960.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passed to engrossment. You're recognized to suspend the Constitutional three-day rule.
Don't move, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 1960. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 1960, relating to digital replication rights in the voice and visual likeness of individuals.
You're recognized on final.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of Senate Bill 1960.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 825.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take consider committee substitute to Senate Bill 825. Senate Bill 825 aims to provide Texas lawmakers with comprehensive data-driven insights into the economic, environmental, and financial impacts of illegal immigration on the state of Texas. Of course, we're a border state that faces unique challenges related to illegal immigration, including law enforcement costs, healthcare services, education, and a strain on our infrastructure. However, there is yet to be a specific statewide study and comprehensive analysis of these impacts. Currently, state leaders do not have access to clear and consistent data to guide policy decisions regarding illegal immigration, and without such information, making informed decisions about addressing the costs and consequences of illegal immigration becomes exceedingly difficult. Senate Bill 825 seeks to bridge this gap by directing the governor's office to conduct an biannual study that will assess the impact of illegal immigration on Texas in key areas, state and local expenditures, infrastructure, healthcare, and education costs, as well as broader economic effects. Senate Bill 825 empowers the governor's office to collaborate with various state and federal agencies, political subdivisions, institutes of higher education, nonprofit organizations, private entities to conduct the study. The findings of the study will be compiled in a report which must be submitted to the Lieutenant Governor and the legislature by December 1st of each even number year. And the bill ensures that state policymakers have access to necessary data to make informed decisions on how to address these impacts of illegal immigration, of course, make us better equipped to respond. And I move suspension.
Senator Gutierrez, what purpose?
Well, the gentleman yields for just a few questions.
You've never had just a few questions, but we'll give it a ride. Senator Middleton.
I do yield. Thank you.
Promise, just a few. Yes, define few, less than 6. Senator Middleton, thank you. How much does this study cost?
So the fiscal impact, the fiscal note says right now it can be accomplished with existing resources.
Okay, so there's no additional cost to the state of Texas.
It's compiling the data. This is something that hasn't occurred in many years. And of course, our existing agencies and political subdivisions have this available to them. It just creates a formalized process to create this study and have this report delivered to us in the legislature.
You said that there's no study that's ever been done before.
There was one, there has been one in the past by the comptroller, not the governor.
That's right. And that was done by Carol Keaton Strayhorn, correct?
I believe in 2006, yes.
Republicans, best I can tell, right?
Or independent.
Well, she was a Republican, right?
Yes, she was.
All right. Have you reviewed that study?
I've seen the cover letter for it, yes.
Are you aware that that study showed that there was a net benefit to having migrants in the state of Texas as opposed to what they cost us. They actually made more money and contributed more money into the economy through disposable income, through buying homes, buying cars, farming, providing all of the labor that they're performing that nobody wants to do. Are you aware that the net benefit to the state of Texas was close to $424 million? That was the net impact positive to the state of Texas.
This is in 2006, right, Senator?
Just saying if you're aware.
I'm aware of the study. I disagree with some of its findings.
And the gross state product, Carol Strainhorn suggested, was $17 billion contribution to the state of Texas, correct?
I believe that's what the report says.
And your report doesn't look to study any kind of benefit, does it?
Well, Senator, we're not in the habit in this chamber to spend taxpayer dollars to study the benefit of breaking our laws. Is that what you're suggesting here?
Well, I don't know. Why don't you ask the farmers and your constituents that utilize migrant labor, both legal and illegal?
Senator, this is a study, and it is not good policy on behalf of the state of Texas to spend taxpayer dollars to determine the positive aspects of breaking the laws that we passed in this body, federal laws as well.
You have any meatpacking plants in your community?
I believe there are in Brazoria County.
You ever go to a meatpacking plant during the C shift in the middle of the night?
No, I have not.
In this state or in the United States? Vast majority of C shift employees of our meat packing plants and our chicken processing plants in the United States of America, the people that feed and process the food that we eat every day, are migrants. But they're hidden in the color of the night, in the darkness of the night. That's the hypocrisy of America, isn't it, Senator Middleton? You're not going to answer?
I don't think there's a question in that.
Well, I said, is that the hypocrisy of America?
I don't think there's any hypocrisy about enforcing our laws, Senator.
I'm just saying, are people that employ these people, are they breaking the law?
So is your question, should we enforce our immigration laws, or are our laws and Constitution just suggestions?
Are those employers breaking the law?
They may be. I don't know the cases you've given me here.
Okay. But yet you don't want to study the net positive of all of the food producers and all of the agricultural workers and all of the home builders and all of the guys putting the roofs on in the summer and all the women that are taking care of kids across this state. You don't want to talk about anything about the disposable income, the disposable revenue, their indirect income, by all that job creation. You don't want to talk about any of that in this report, correct?
This also gives us an ability to seek reimbursement, as we know with Operation Lone Star and our border security operations. That's been a big push. We accounted fully for that. Of course, that's outside of the study, but that's about $11 billion that we're hoping to get back from our federal government. And of course, our hope is if we can get that done, we would hope to refund that to taxpayers and put it in our state surplus as well. Obviously, that's part of a broader plan here. The bottom line is we just don't know the full cost. And I can give you an example here just on our public hospitals, right? So uncompensated care in Texas public hospitals, somewhere between $579 million and $717 million annually. And that's just one little segment.
That was a long answer to a very simple question that you didn't answer. Do you not want to study the positive benefits of migration and immigrants to this state by way of buying houses, buying cars, building houses, taking care of your kids, and so on and so on? It's a simple yes or no.
We do not want to spend taxpayer dollars to study the positive aspects of breaking the law.
All right. And you don't want to study their benefits to the people that actually are doing the work that most Texans do not want to do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Hinojosa, For what purpose?
Will Senator Middleton yield for a couple of questions?
Do you yield?
I do, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Now, this bill came through Board of Security.
It did, yes, yeah, and on the committee, correct.
And one of the issues that came up was that what we were looking at was an unbiased report. Is that correct?
We want to collect data, correct.
Yeah, so that for us to make any kind of decisions, whichever way the decision is made, we need to have accurate information.
Yes, we want all the information, absolutely.
And one of the points that was made during the hearing itself is that it does not necessarily exclude any positive impact, economic impact that the migrants may have. We're not excluding that in your bill, Senate Bill 825.
So this seeks to establish costs, right? And those costs are related to a number of items laid out in the bill. Obviously, one of them is the financial impact, another one is environmental impact, the economic impact, but at the end of the day, it's very broad, so it allows the governor's office great authority to gather this information from various state agencies, various political subdivisions of the state, perhaps our federal partners. It leaves that largely up to them to collect that.
And when we talk about cost, you also need to talk about, okay, what are some of the benefits, if any?
Well, so that's where we disagree, Senator. I do not believe it's good policy on behalf of the state to pay for taxpayer-funded subsidies and studies to talk about the positive aspects of breaking the law. Where do we stop on that?
Well, it's just
where do we stop?
You change in your testimony that you testified before the Board of Security Committee. And all we were asking was for an unbiased report. Either way, whichever way the results show, we're not trying to push any type of funding already. The governor can have a full discretion to file a report on what is happening as it relates to the impact that illegal migration may have here in the state.
Well, we want to make sure it's unbiased, of course, but everything we do around here is under the framework of following our laws, right? I mean, in our Constitution.
But I'm not asking
we
that.
We can't go outside of that and say all of a sudden we're going to just start determining the positive aspects of acting like the things we pass in here are just suggestions. And if there's some positive aspect to it, then we need to look at that and treat it like a suggestion. That's not the right thing to do.
Senator Middleton, we're trying to get a full, accurate picture. When you say that, it sort of distorts the purpose of this bill, because I supported this bill, and I think we need this type of information. But you have to give the discretion and the ability for a governor to be able to look at the whole picture. Whatever they need to look at to be able to ascertain exactly what decisions we have to make as legislators to focus on our economy, to focus on our costs, healthcare, to focus on our whatever costs involved, education. So it is to get an accurate picture, and that's the testimony that we heard in the Board of Security Committee. Nobody's trying to encourage anybody to break the law. That's not what we're talking about at all. We don't want anybody to break the law. All we're trying to see for us to get a clear picture of what's going on. And I think your bill does that, except that your testimony, as you answered Senator Gutierrez's questions, you sort of went a little bit more than the way you testified. Nobody supports breaking the law. Nobody wants anybody to break the law. But I think for us, as legislators, we need a very clear picture of what's going on out in the field. And that's all I'm saying. So don't go off on this other stuff that doesn't mean anything about breaking the law. I, as a legislator, want to know exactly how much it's costing us. Right? When we talk about cost, you also need to you need to take the whole, you can't just look at one side of the ledger, you have to look at both sides of the ledger. So I would implore you that when you make your responses, stay within the framework of what you talked about and testified in Board of Security Committee, and that is to give the governor the discretion of an unbiased report, so for us we could make informed decisions.
And it is a very broad discretion. As you pointed out, it's a very broad broadly drafted piece of legislation to give the most discretion possible. So,
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. The vote is on the suspension of the rules. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell,
24 ayes, 7 nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays on second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 825. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 825 relating to an annual study on the economic, environmental, and financial impact of illegal immigration in this state.
There is an amendment. Following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 1 by Middleton.
On your amendment, you're recognized.
thank you, Mr. President. Members, all this amendment says is that on request of the Criminal Justice Division of the Office of Governor, the OCA, the Office of Court Administration of the Texas Judicial System, shall coordinate, provide information to that division. And I move adoption.
Any objections? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. There is an amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 2 by Eckhart.
Senator Eckhart, you're recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. The last time the state studied the financial impacts, as the colloquy between Senator Middleton, Senator Chuy Hinojosa, and Senator Roland Gutierrez showed, was in 2006 under Controller Strayhorn. In that study, the controller looked at, genuinely looked at the impacts, and of course the word impact does not assume negative or positive. And therefore, the controller looked at both the costs of services paid as well as state revenues generated by undocumented immigrants. Undocumented immigrants are an integral part of our state's workforce, as Senator Gutierrez pointed out. And this amendment provides the guidance to the Office of the Governor in determining the financial impacts, whether positive or negative, of illegal immigration. And the guidance aligns with the same methodology that Controller Strayhorn used in 2006. It does not assume whether the impacts are positive or negative. It simply aligns the methodology with the prior study. It does not put a thumb on the scale, and it will be truly unbiased. The reason for proposing this is a biased study that only looks at negative impacts will not be broadly useful. An unbiased study that looks at impacts irrespective of whether they are positive or negative will have broad utility and be able to guide us in our decision making. And I move adoption.
Senator Middleton on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, for the same reasons that I laid out with Senator Gutierrez, I respectfully oppose this amendment.
I'm sorry, I did not see Senator Menendez. Senator Menendez on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Do you have a question for
question of the author of the amendment?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President.
My apologies.
No, not a problem. Senator Eckhart.
Yes, sir.
If I hear you correctly, and first of all, you're not opposed to us getting an honest assessment of the situation. You want an honest assessment. Is that what this amendment is all about?
It is. The idea is that a study is only useful if it's truly seen as analyzing all of the impacts without assuming its positive or negative impact. It's like the scientific method we learned in high school. You go in with a hypothesis, but you leave open the idea that your hypothesis may be disproved by the objective facts that you find.
Have you heard that other states that have made efforts to crack down on the non-documented workforce having problems in their agriculture and other areas? I've heard of some harvests that have gone unharvested, that have wasted in the fields. And so are you concerned that if we don't have an accurate picture, really we could be losing out on an opportunity to help maybe provide input to comprehensive immigration reform, where we can maybe put together a guest worker program if some of the industries in our state say, look, we've tried to hire people here in the country, but we can't have enough people that want to work in the fields or want to work on the rooftops or want to work in whatever industries. Are you concerned that maybe we're missing on an opportunity to improve the situation, not just in this state, but in the country?
I do. I believe that if we have a biased study that only looks at the costs and then we based policy on it, we run the risk of having unintended negative consequences to our Texas economy. But if we have an unbiased study that looks at both the positive and negative impacts of undocumented immigration, we will be a better partner to the federal government in crafting changes in our immigration system that respond to what is a worldwide migration issue that is going to continue.
Have you heard that there are thousands of young people in this state that were brought here as children, some known as dreamers or DACA kids, who have contributed greatly to this state, but are in a limbo because of the fact that their parents brought them here as infants, in many cases, toddlers. And there is, if we don't have an unbiased study, we have no way of determining the positive impacts that these dreamers have had on our state.
It's with an unbiased study, we would be prepared to have a much more robust response to our immigration challenges and be able to look at segments of our undocumented communities rather than as a monolith that has only negative consequences.
Thank you for your amendment. It's a good amendment. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members.
Senator Middleton, I'll just go back to you on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members. I respectfully oppose this amendment. I don't think it's proper for the state to get in the business of doing studies on the positive economic outcomes of breaking the law. So I respectfully oppose this amendment.
Secretary, recall the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt,
21 ayes, 10 nays. The amendment fails. You're recognized on passage to engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President, members. I move passage to engrossment.
Secretary, recall the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
23 ayes and 8 nays. We'll hold there unless you can find 2 friends. Senator Betancourt, you recognize to suspend the regular order of business. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2010.
Thank you, Mr. President. Article 3, Section 52 of the Texas Constitution prohibits legislature from making any grant or authorizing any county, city, or town, other political corporations or subdivisions of the state to make a grant of public money or thing of value to any individual, association, or corporation. Senate Bill 2010 will ensure the state, cities, and counties comply with the state's constitutional gift prohibitions by prohibiting a political subdivision from adopting or enforcing an order or regulation or any other measure to deprive their operation of a guaranteed income program. Committee substitute Senate Bill 2010 ensures political subdivisions may not circumvent cash or unconditional requirements by using alternative transfer methods or by imposing conditions related to geography, income, race, or gender. And with that, Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 2010.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
22 ayes, 9 nays. Rules suspended. Chair lays out. Second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2010. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2010 relating to the authority of a political subdivision to establish and operate a guaranteed income program.
You're recognized on passage or engrossment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage and engrossment of the committee substituted Senate Bill 2010.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
22 ayes, 9 nays. We'll stay right there.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Menendez, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 546.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, committee substitutes is Senate Bill 546. At this time, I'd like to take up and suspend the rules to take and consider the committee substitute 546. And I want to thank Chairman Nichols and his committee for working with us on this, because the rationale, the genesis for this bill was a horrific crash that occurred last March in Bastrop County, where 44 preschool students as well as 11 adults experienced a rollover after a trip to the zoo, killing Ulysses Rodriguez Montoya, a pre-K student, and Ryan Wallace, a doctoral student at University of Texas. And because of the tragedies like this one, the state has been working to increase school bus safety for over 20 years. In 2007, we required any bus purchased after 2010 to include a 3-point seatbelt, and in 2017, we allowed school boards facing financial challenges to waive this requirement by a public vote. Even still, there are school districts that lack seatbelts on a majority of their school buses. We've been working with the school districts around the state, the families of crash victims who have incorporated input from committee members in crafting this substitute. The bill as substituted does not force any new cost onto our school districts around the state. What it does, it gives us more insight into the extent of the number of buses without 3-point seatbelts and the cost it would take to bring them into compliance with this law that has been in place for almost 2 decades. Additionally, the bill continues the requirement for all school buses in the state to have 3-point seatbelts, but provides exceptions for buses for which retrofitting would void a manufacturer's or dealer's warranty. Finally, it allows school districts that are financially unable to adopt the 3-point seatbelt requirement to submit a report to TEA outlining the number of buses that are not equipped with the seatbelts, the types of seatbelts they may have, and the costs associated to equip all of the buses with the 3-point seatbelts. We understand school districts are not going to be expected to meet this cost, but instead, TEA will gather the information and send it to us before the next legislative session. And this is, with this report, hopefully we will know what it takes to help all children in Texas ride on a bus with the 3-point seatbelt and have their lives be protected. With that, I move suspension, Mr. President.
Senator Menendez moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 546. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco, Campbell.
25 ayes, 6 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 546. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 546, relating to seatbelts on buses that transport children.
Following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Menendez.
Senator Menendez, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment's a clarifying amendment. It tells the school districts that they are required to send their report to TEA by the end of the 2025-2026 school year. Members, you just got to remember, the report is simply how many school buses do you have that don't have seatbelts or don't have the 3-point seatbelts. Additionally, it requires TEA to submit their report to the legislature by January 1, 2027, before the next legislative session. I wanted to ensure that we had clarity in the timelines so that the legislature can have the information necessary to determine how to best help our school districts have safe transportation for all children. I also want to thank Chairwoman Huffman for the $10 million she's put in the budget for seatbelts. That's going to go a long way, but we want to make sure that we know and we don't have an excuse from any school district that say they didn't tell us that they didn't have buses without the 3-point seatbelts. I move adoption of floor amendment number 1.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 1? Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Menendez, you recognize for a motion.
Mr. President, I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Menendez moves passage to engrossment. There is objection. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco, Campbell.
25 ayes, 6 nays. Bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Menendez, you recognize for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Menendez moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook,
There
Craig.
be 25 ayes, 6 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading, final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 546. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 546 relating to seat belts on buses that transport children.
Senator Menendez recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, members, I want to thank you all for helping us make sure that all the children of Texas have a safe school bus to ride on. I move final passage of committee substitute Senate Bill 546.
Senator Menendez moves final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 546. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook.
25 ayes, 6 nays. Bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 586.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Members, at this time, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 586. Senate Bill 586 simply puts in statute one of the state's most popular historical preservation programs, the Historical Texas Cemetery Designation Program. For those unfamiliar with this program, it allows individuals to apply to the program to have a cemetery designated as an historical Texas cemetery. Cemeteries must be at least 50 years old and be worthy of recognition and preservation for the Cemeteries Historical Association. That's what the bill does.
Senator West moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 586. There is objection. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell,
28 ayes, 3 nays. Rules suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 586. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 586 relating to establishing the Historic Texas Cemeteries Designation Program.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage to engrossment.
Senator West moves passage to engrossment. There is objection. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
28 ayes, 3 nays. Bill is passed to engrossment. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So move.
Senator West moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
28 ayes, 3 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading final passage Senate Bill 586. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 586 relating to establishing the Historic Texas Cemeteries Designation Program.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Move final passage of Senate Bill 586.
Senator West moves final passage of Senate Bill 586. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
28 ayes, 3 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations. Senator Sparks, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved.
Senator Sparks moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
25 ayes, 6 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 530. The Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 530, relating the accreditation of certain post-secondary educational institutions in this state.
Senator Sparks, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of Senate Bill 530.
Senator Sparks moves final passage of Senate Bill 530. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
24 ayes, 7 nays. Bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Middleton. You're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1150.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider committee substitute to Senate Bill 1150. Members, as we know, our oil and gas industry in Texas is the cornerstone to our state's economy and the primary driver behind the Texas miracle. Last year alone, the industry paid over $27 billion in state and local taxes. And of course, we also know that Texas leads in America's energy independence. And every one of us is aware how critical oil and gas development is for our domestic consumption, export markets, and of course, our national security. However, we do have an issue in the state. There are over 160,000 inactive wells right now. And while we recognize that many of these, when managed properly, are valuable assets that can be revitalized and perhaps later reactivated, we need to address those that have reached the end of their lifespan and could potentially pose a risk to health, safety, our natural resources, agriculture, livestock, and wildlife. And of course, this issue has also become a problem for taxpayers, where we have continued to increase the amount of funding in the budget to plug orphan wells. Last year was about 1,000, and the ask in this most recent budget was $100 million. So the committee substitute to Senate Bill 1150 requires that a well must be plugged or returned to production once it reaches 15 years of inactivity, so 15 years, and 25 years of life since the completion date. The requirement will be an effective date in 2027, allowing operators and the Railroad Commission time to plan for implementation. The bill also allows a phase-in period through a compliance plan that ends 15 years after the plugging requirement, and this bill becomes effective. And of course, it must be approved by the Railroad Commission after evaluating several factors where an operator commits to plug or restore a well to active operation. The bill requires an annual report to the Railroad Commission and to the legislature detailing the status of Texas inactive wells portfolio, including the total number of inactive wells and statistics as the age and length that those wells have been inactive. Over time, this is anticipated to cut off the supply of inactive wells that are feeding into our orphan well program, which of course the taxpayers pay to plug those. And Mr. President, with that, I move to suspend Senate's regular order of business.
Senator Middleton moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1150. Is there objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 1150. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 1150, relating the plugging of and reporting on inactive wells subject to the jurisdiction of the Railroad Commission.
Following an amendment, Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Middleton.
Senator Middleton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment clarifies the original intent of the bill, which is a compliance plan for operators. And essentially what it does is it creates the 15-year window for them to come into compliance, and it pushes back the deadline by 2 years in order for them to be able to avail themselves of the full 15 years. This amendment also allows a clarifying language, to ensure that the transfer of a well is certified to be in compliance. In other words, when you transfer a well, you have to certify that you're in compliance. and that the transfer was performed in good faith, as well as fixing a drafting error regarding when an operator must submit a report to the Railroad Commission regarding an inactive well that is over 15 years old. And with that, I move adoption.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 1? Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Middleton, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Middleton moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Middleton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I move to suspend the 3-day rule.
Senator Middleton moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
30 ayes, 1 nay. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 1150. The Secretary will read the caption.
Committee Substitute Senate Bill 1150 relating to the plugging of and reporting on inactive wells subject to the jurisdiction of the Railroad Commission of Texas.
Senator Middleton recognized for a motion.
Move final passage.
Senator Middleton moves final passage of Committee Substitute Senate Bill 1150. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
30 ayes, 1 nay. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1184.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, last session we passed Senate Bill 1932 to keep Texas wines in the Texas market by authorizing wine collectors to sell wine to appropriately permitted restaurants if that wine is manufactured not less than 20 years before the sale date. This session, we're looking to expand on the success of Senate Bill 1932 by introducing this legislation, Senate Bill 1184, which would lower the minimum age of eligible wine from 20 years to 10 years. This change is supported by data that shows that many of the most popular wines reach their peak for consumption between 10 and 20 years of age. There are individual wine collectors in Texas who possess these older wine collections, but they're opting to sell their wines to other states because Texas restricts their ability to sell these 10 to 20-year-old wines to restaurants. And restaurants aren't receiving these wines from distributors or manufacturers either, because it's not an economically viable strategy for them to hold on to a wine for that long. With the coming of the Michelin Guide listed restaurants to Texas, this change allows our restaurants to compete with states with even more lenient rules, including Florida. Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 1184.
Senator Creighton moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 1184. Is there objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1184. The Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 1184 relating to the age of wine authorized to be sold by a wine collection seller.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Creighton moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move suspension of the 3-day rule.
Senator Creighton moves suspension of the 3-day rule. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
30 ayes, 1 nay. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 1184. The Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 1184 relating to the age of wine authorized to be sold by a wine collection seller.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move final passage of Senate Bill 1184.
Senator Creighton moves final passage of Senate Bill 1184. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
30 ayes, 1 nay. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President, members.
Senator Hinojosa of Nueces, you recognize for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2185.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 2185. This bill addresses a critical issue regarding the bilingual education allotment within the Texas public school finance system. Senate Bill 2185 would provide a legislative fix to give TEA the authority and ability to fund all public schools in support of the students and the teachers in a dual language classroom. Senate Bill 2185 aims to clarify and enhance the funding available for school districts that offer alternative language education methods with a focus on dual language immersion programs. And with that, Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business.
Senator Hinojosa moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2185. Is there objection? Hearing none. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 2185. The Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 2185, relating the bilingual education allotment under the public school finance system.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Hinojosa moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none. Bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Hinojosa, you are recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. So moved.
Senator Hinojosa moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
31 ayes, no nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading final passage of Senate Bill 2185. Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 2185, relating the bilingual education allotment under the public school finance system.
Senator Hinojosa, you recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move final passage of Senate Bill 2185.
Senator Hinojosa moves final passage of Senate Bill 2185. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
31 ayes, 0 nays. Bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1923.
Thank you very much, Mr. President and members. At this time, I move to suspend the Senate regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 1923. The number of people in this state, particularly grandparents, who are raising children who are not their own biological children on a temporary basis is rising, members. These placements often occur under agreements under chapters 34 and 35 of the Texas Family Code. The Texas Silver-Haired Legislature and grandparents raising grandparents approached me and asked me to carry this particular bill. Very simply, Senate Bill 1923 very simply makes the child support follow the child for Chapter 34 and 35 placements. That's what the bill does. I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Senator West moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1923. Is there objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 1923. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 1923, relating to the modification of certain orders providing for the support of a child.
Following an amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by West.
Senator West, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. That moved, this floor amendment simply removes the parent-child safety placements from the bill. We're doing this at the request of the Texas Council of Family Defense Attorneys, who correctly note that most parent-child safety placements do not last long enough for this bill to be able to apply. So I'd move adoption of the floor amendment.
Question is on the adoption of floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing none. Stand by. Senator Campbell, for what purpose?
I just want to ask the author a question.
Senator West, do you yield?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to make sure, and I don't see it in here, but does this amendment, and well, I need to speak to this amendment. Does this amendment at all support the physical condition if the family member, the kinship, is physically not really able to take care of the child, and the child has been with a non-kinship family? Does this amendment in any way force the child to be placed with kinship, even though kinship may be an 84-year-old great-grandma? You hear what I'm saying? I should have asked you about the bill rather than this.
No, it doesn't.
It does not. Thank you, Senator West.
And I know how you are on these particular issues, and I think you align perfectly with this issue. I know how you are on this particular issue, and we align perfectly together on this one.
Thank you, Senator West. Thank you, Mr. President.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing none. The amendment is adopted. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage. Final engrossment.
Senator West moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none. Bill is passed to engrossment. Senator West, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So move.
Senator West moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco, Campbell.
31 ayes, 0 nays. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 1923. The Secretary read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 1923, relating to the modification of certain orders providing for the support of a child.
Senator West, you're recognized for a motion.
Mr. President, on behalf of the grandparents of this state and the Silver-Haired legislatures, I move final passage of Senate Bill 1923.
Senator West moves final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 1923. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Bardwell, Blanco,
31
Campbell.
ayes, 0 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations, Senator. Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, the Early Literacy and Numeracy Act is a significant investment in Texas' youngest learners to get our tiniest Texans on grade level. Also to improve their outcomes in all of our public schools. We've heard the data for years, and it was highlighted in committee that if a child is not on grade level by the end of the third grade, the chances are this child will continue to fall further and further behind with their curriculum. Teachers and interventionists reinforced this point in their testimony in our recent hearings, urging the state to prioritize early identification and targeted support to prevent long-term academic struggles. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252, it gives our K through 3 classrooms the tools and the training and the real-time data to intervene early and effectively before it's too late. This is not just an education bill, members. It's a workforce bill. It's a bill about the future of this great state. It's a teacher support bill, and it's a parent empowerment bill. When we invest early in our youngest Texans, we give every child the foundation they need for a lifetime of success. And we build a stronger Texas in the process. This bill is about urgency, members, and accountability, and student outcomes. Senate Bill 2252, it protects instructional time by ensuring that short formative progress and monitoring tools, not just high-stakes testing, are used to inform classroom teaching. It also funds stipends for our teachers above and beyond our teacher pay raise legislation. These teachers who complete state-approved literacy and math academies. It clarifies the use of screeners. A screener is a short assessment to identify a student who could need additional support and intervention. And this bill will separate literacy and numeracy tools to allow local districts to choose from multiple high-quality options at no cost and require full transparency for our families. It also, members, it establishes public reporting of screener results with parents empowering local communities to build best practices and track progresses well before STAR season. The legislation also ensures targeted investment by expanding the base of the early education allotment and opening it up for more than just the current multiplier, economically disadvantaged or English learners. It opens it up to all kinder through third grade age Texans in our state, something that we should have done years ago, members. Importantly, committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252 does not require any student to take a screener against their parents' wishes. Parents can opt out, and the bill makes that right explicit in statute. The numbers speak for themselves, members. According to the most recent 2024 NAEP results, 69% of Texas fourth graders are below proficient in reading, a number worse than in 2022 and also worse than in 2019. We've seen what's possible when states invest and intervene early. Mississippi and Louisiana have made impressive gains in literacy outcomes using strategies similar to the ones outlined in this bill. Members, Mississippi and Louisiana have made impressive gains with these same metrics, gains that have outperformed Texas. Texas students deserve that same opportunity, and with committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252, we set a clear expectation that early reading and math matters, and that we're willing to back it with resources, training, and real-time student data. With that, Mr. President, I move suspension of the regular order of business to take up and consider committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252.
Senator Creighton moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252. Is there objection? Hearing none, the rules are suspended. The chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2252 relating to measures to support kindergarten readiness and early literacy and numeracy skills for public school students.
Following amendment, Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Creighton.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. This amendment is consistent with committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252 in that it already requires the data from instruments to be shared with parents in a post-data collection report. But the amendment clarifies also that past data reports must be included as the year goes on so our parents can assess for themselves any observable student growth across that school year.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Creighton, you're recognized. Following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 by Creighton.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment would allow high-performing teachers with quantifiable evidence of excellent teaching the opportunity to add themselves to the agency-approved providers list of student tutors for the $750 grant. This amendment supports teachers and our school districts by giving an additional opportunity for the best teachers to help our students in the most need. I move adoption.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 2. Is there any objection? Hearing none, floor amendment 2 is adopted. Following amendment, Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 3 by Creighton.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment increases the percentage of funding that our school districts retain when a pre-K student utilizes a private provider. The bill currently allows districts to retain 5% of the funds a student generates, and this amendment increases that to 10%. Increasing the amount of funds school districts retain will encourage pre-K partnerships while helping ensure that private pre-K providers can meet their bottom line. I move adoption.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 3. Is there objection? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. Following amendment, Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 4 by Creighton.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is a fiscal responsibility amendment. We're working diligently with Chair Huffman on Article 3, making sure that we provide a historic uplift to our public schools. This amendment's necessary pending ongoing budget negotiations with the House. I move adoption.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 4. Is there objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move passage to engrossment for committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252.
Senator Creighton moves passage to engrossment for committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252. Is there objection? Hearing none, the bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move suspension of the 3-day rule.
Senator Creighton moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
30 ayes, 1 nay. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading, final passage, committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 2252, relating to measures to support kindergarten readiness and early literacy and numeracy skills for public school students.
Senator Creighton, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252.
Senator Creighton moves final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 2252. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell, Cook.
30 ayes, 1 nay. The bill is finally passed.
Thank you, Mr. President, members.
Senator Perry, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1870.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, local government compliance with drug laws. Senate Bill 1870. Past few years, several local governments have adopted policy and ordinances that are designed to decriminalize controlled substances or instruct law enforcement or prosecutors not to enforce state drug laws. Senate Bill 1870 prohibits local governments from adopting policies or ordinances that attempt to decriminalize drugs. If a local government violates the bill, citizens may report the violation to the Attorney General's office. The bill authorizes the Attorney General to seek a $25,000 civil penalty for first violation, $50,000 for subsequent violations. With that, I move to suspend the regular order of business. Committee substitute, Senate Bill 1870.
Senator Perry moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 1870. There is objection. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
23 ayes, 8 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 1870. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute, Senate Bill 1870, relating to municipal and county enforcement of drug and consumable hemp product laws.
Senator Perry, you're recognized for a motion.
Move passage engrossment.
Senator Perry moves passage to engrossment. There is objection. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
23 ayes, 8 nays. The bill is passed to engrossment and will hold there.
Thank you.
Senator Parker, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 2405.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business to take up and consider the committee substitute to 2405, the sunset legislation addressing the continuation and critical improvements to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the Board of Pardons and Paroles, Windham School District, and the Correctional Managed Healthcare Committee. Members, I want to begin by expressing my great thanks to the entire Sunset staff for their thorough review and tireless work in evaluating TDCJ. They have been a pleasure to work with at every point in this process. Their detailed analysis and commitment
to strengthening the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, the Board of Pardons and Paroles, the Wyndham School District, and the Correctional Managed Healthcare Committee have been critical to crafting this bill and to addressing the areas of improvement identified through the sunset process. As you all know, these entities play vital roles in ensuring public safety, offender rehabilitation, and effective reentry into our communities. The Sunset Advisory Commission identified significant areas of improvement, particularly around facility management, staffing challenges, rehabilitation programs, parole supervision, and transparency in decision-making. This legislation directly responds to those recommendations by implementing several key reforms. First, it requires TDCJ to develop a comprehensive 10-year long-term facilities and staffing plan to strategically address prison capacity and workforce shortages. Second, the bill establishes an ongoing inventory and biennial evaluation of rehabilitation and reentry programs. It also mandates the creation of a strategic plan developed jointly by TDCJ and Wyndham to streamline these programs, which will reduce wait times and eliminate redundancy, ensuring inmates receive timely, effective programming before their release. Members, by Sunset's estimation, this will result in over $150 million in savings to the state. Third, it strengthens parole supervision by requiring the Texas Board of Criminal Justice to establish parole officer salary structures and caseload guides in rule, ensuring that flexibility and responsiveness are given to them to address changing needs. Additionally, the bill creates a work group consisting of parole voters and TDCJ staff to regularly review the effectiveness of special parole conditions. And fourth, it enhances transparency and fairness in parole decisions, requiring the Board of Pardons and Paroles to better document and report decision-making outcomes. This includes improvements to the medically recommended intensive supervision process, ensuring clearer criteria and training for panel members making these sensitive decisions. And fifth, the legislation codifies the Office of Inspector General within TDCJ, recognizing its crucial role as an independent law enforcement agency responsible for investigating activities within our corrections system. And lastly, the bill contains practical updates to incentivize officer retention by adjusting compensation time policies and allows greater flexibility in managing TDCJ facilities and operations. These changes represent a thoughtful, evidence-based approach to improving public safety, to ensuring effective use of state resources, and to supporting successful rehabilitation and reintegration into society for offenders. Members, the committee substitute for 2405 ensures TDCJ and associated entities continue to fulfill their mission effectively, transparently, and efficiently. Mr. President, I move suspension.
Senator Menendez, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. President. Questions of the author?
Senator Parker, do you yield?
I yield, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Parker. First of all, let me say thank you for all the hard work. It's quite a bill, a lot of ground covered in the 93 sections of the bill. Senator Parker, we spoke earlier about your legislation and the tremendous need. I was very happy to hear in your layout, I think you said the word transparency at least 2 or 3 times and how important that is in all aspects. I also heard another word that you mentioned is rehabilitation. And so, interestingly enough, you talked about retention of your employees, retention of our employees. In order to make that happen, I mean, obviously we want to make the best working conditions for those state employees working one of the toughest jobs there has to be, our correctional system.
No question.
And so I want to make sure, are we doing everything we can to make working conditions such that we're not putting anybody's life in danger, not the correctional officers, not the prisoners. And I know that some of our prison facilities in the summer in particular and very, very cold times become almost inhumane in their living conditions. Is there anything in your bill that's addressing that?
Well, thank you, Senator, for that. And look, we share the same objective. I don't think there's a tougher environment in having to work, frankly, than being a guard or various employees, state employees that are crucial in these prison facilities. It's very, very tough work. And so what we're doing comprehensively, look, we heard all that kind of feedback during the sunset process. Tremendous testimony, people being concerned about these issues. And I really believe that the staffing plan and the flexibility that we're providing in this legislation now will help with regard to pay and benefits so that we're really getting great people there and we're recognizing the quality of their work. And then on top of that, we have a comprehensive 10-year facilities plan that'll be put in place as well to address all the issues that you just described in great detail. So this is a real focus. It's a commitment from all the leadership in TDCJ, and I feel very good about where we are and where we've landed, working through the sunset process, working with all the stakeholders. I want to thank all the people that came forward and testified in the sunset process. It was an extraordinary number of people, and I think they'll attest that we were listening, and we've listened to find a balanced, transparent bill that addresses the challenges but keeps TDCJ much healthier, frankly, going forward into the future.
Well, I would assume that one of the goals as we have people pay their debt to society is that we reduce recidivism and that we rehabilitate people and give them tools to go back into the community. Would you agree?
Look, 100%. I mean, rehabilitation is the key. We want people, once they serve their time, to be able to go back into the free world and be successful and productive, to have the ability to put a roof over their head, to provide for themselves and their families. We've got to address those recidivism issues in a meaningful way, and rehabilitation is absolutely the focus. And I think so much this bill is also focused on the integration of educational opportunities between Wyndham and TDCJ, not just with regard to K through 12 kind of formative education, but with regard to post-secondary. In other words, college opportunities, diplomas, all these things that allow people to have skills to provide on the other side when they've gone through that rehabilitation process.
Well, Senator, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm sure you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy needs, correct?
Yes.
So one of the issues that I'm concerned with is if we allow for temperatures in some of our facilities to reach inhumane levels, 110 degrees in the summer, below freezing in the winter, that we may not be able to rehabilitate people who feel that the state no longer cares about them as humans. And so I hope that you work with me to make sure we can address this going forward.
So I'm happy to talk about that, and of course about the incredible employees that are there in those environments as well. So yes, thank you for the feedback, and I think we're moving forward in a very productive way for our system.
Appreciate you and your work. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
President.
Senator.
Senator Parker moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 2405. Is there objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 2405. The secretary will read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2405 relating to the continuation and functions of the Texas Board of Criminal Justice and the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and to the functions of the Board of Pardons and Paroles, Correctional Managed Health Care Committee, and the Texas Correctional Office on Offenders with Medical or Mental Impairments, and the Wyndham School District.
Following amendment, secretary read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Huffman.
Senator Huffman, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment is aimed at protecting the Board of Pardon and Parole's discretion as authorized by the Texas Constitution. There are regional differences in the security level of prisons, making it difficult to do apple-to-apple comparisons of parole approval rates. The discretion of board members and parole commissioners could be compromised if required to provide explanation on potential variances. So I move adoption of the floor amendment, and I believe it is acceptable to the author.
Senator Parker, you recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, it is absolutely acceptable. It is an excellent amendment, and I appreciate Senator Huffman's excellence and expertise in this area. So very much look forward to putting the amendment on the bill.
The amendment is acceptable to the author. The question is on the adoption of floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing none. Amendment number 1 is adopted. Senator Parker, you recognize for a motion.
Mr. President, I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Parker moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Parker, you are recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Senator Parker moves suspension of the 3-day rule. The secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Bardwell, Blanco, Campbell.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third third reading and final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 2405. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2405 relating the continuation and functions of the Texas Board of Criminal Justice and the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and to the functions of the Board of Pardons and Paroles and other criminal
Senator Parker, you are recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank you, Chairman Flores, for your leadership of the committee. I want to thank everybody in Sunset that's been played an incredible role in this process, all the stakeholders, all the witnesses, and most of all the incredible men and women of TDCJ and all of the associated groups that do such a great job of serving Texas every day. And with that, Mr. President, I move final passage.
Senator Parker moves final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 2405. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco, Campbell.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President, members.
Senator Kolkhorst, you are recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 331.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business and take up and consider at this time committee substitute to Senate Bill 331. Members, committee substitute to Senate Bill 331 will expand price transparency, which is already required for hospitals under Senate Bill 1137, which this body passed last session. This will add acute care facilities that are within the Health and Human Services Commission's regulatory authority. This bill will require the additional facilities to disclose pricing for over 300 highly shoppable medical services in the state of Texas. SB 331 is intended to allow consumer to be able to select healthcare treatments that align with their best interests. Members, I do want to highlight that this bill, after receiving stakeholder input, will only apply to facilities that make more than $7 million in gross revenue. The complaint is that some of the smaller facilities, this would be too onerous for them to achieve. Facilities that meet this threshold and violate the provisions of this bill will be subject to a staggered penalty schedule that is based on gross revenue. I will have an amendment that will remove the fiscal note, members, and do a clarification. With that, I will yield for questions, or I would like to suspend the regular order of business.
Senator Kolkhorst moves suspension of the regular order of business on committee substitute for Senate Bill 331. Is there objection? Hearing none. Rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 331. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 331 relating the disclosure of healthcare cost information by certain healthcare facilities.
Following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Kolkhorst.
Senator Kolkhorst, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. In working with HHSC, I'm offering this amendment to do two things: clarify the facilities that are required to comply with this bill, and number 2, to set the compliance date as of for August 31st, 2029. In calculating the fiscal note, HHSC assumed that committee substitute to Senate Bill 331 included facilities that they were given authority over by CMS. That is not the intent. The floor amendment clarifies that facilities includes acute care facilities under HHSC's regulatory authority. So with that, members, I move to adoption of this floor amendment.
Questions on the adoption of floor amendment number 1. Is there objection? Hearing none. Amendment is adopted. Senator Kolkhorst, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move committee substitute Senate Bill 331 to passage to engrossment.
Senator Kolkhorst moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none. Bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Kolkhorst, you are recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Senator Colcourse moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 331. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 331 relating to the disclosure of healthcare cost information by certain healthcare facilities.
Senator Colcourse, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move final passage of committee substitute to Senate Bill 331.
Senator Colcourse moves final passage of committee substitute for Senate Bill 331. The Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The bill is finally passed. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2129.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. I move to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2129. This relates to the operation of vehicles at railroad grade crossings, raising the criminal penalty for disregarding them. 2129 aims to reduce the number of railroad crossing accidents by increasing the penalty for ignoring warnings to wrongfully crossing railroad tracks. 2129 would double the fine, which has not been increased in a very, very, very long time, associated with ignoring a rail crossing arm or a railroad flagger's warning, further deterring drivers from dangerous crossings. We do have a lot of accidents in this state. We're trying to curtail it, so therefore I move to suspend the regular order of business to take up and consider Senate Bill 2129.
Senator Johnson moves suspension of the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2129. Is there objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 2129. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 2129 relating to the operation of vehicles at railroad grade crossings.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized for a motion.
Thank you. I move passage to engrossment.
Senator Johnson moves passage to engrossment. Is there objection? Hearing none, bill is passed to engrossment. Senator Johnson, you're recognized for a motion to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
Moved.
Senator Johnson moves suspension of the 3-day rule. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on third reading and final passage of Senate Bill 2129. The Secretary read the caption.
Senate Bill 2129 relating to the operation of vehicles at railroad grade crossings.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized for a motion.
I move final passage of Senate Bill 2129.
Senator Johnson moves final passage of Senate Bill 2129. Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
31 ayes, 0 nays. The bill is passed. Thank you.
President.
Good job.
Got it under.
Senator Birdwell, you're recognized on SJR 68 to suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the Senate's regular order of business, take up and consider SJR 68. Members, near the end of the 2023 legislative session, after the Texas House of Representatives passed articles of impeachment, Governor Patrick named me as chair of the special committee to recommend rules of procedure for the court of impeachment. In that role and from the lessons learned as chair of that special committee, I found the need for clarification and additional guidelines of the law governing both constitutional and statutory impeachment. SJR 68, in conjunction with the enabling language of Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2051, seeks to fix the inadequacies identified in 2023, as well as those identified upon my continued review of our impeachment process. Impeachment is neither a criminal nor a civil proceeding, but rather a delicate mixture of both elements of the two within the political realm. The powers relating to impeachment are a vital check in the balances between branches of government. In Ferguson versus Maddox, the Texas Supreme Court held that the primary purpose of an impeachment is to protect the state, not necessarily to punish the offender. Under Texas law, there are two types of impeachments: constitutional and statutory. Constitutional impeachment, contained in Article 15 of the Texas Constitution, applies to statewide elected officials, but Article 15 provides little to no procedural guidelines on the impeachment process. Statutory impeachment, contained in Government Code Chapter 665, applies to a state officer, a head of a state department or state institution, or a member, regent, trustee, or commissioner having control or management of a state institution or enterprise. While Chapter 665 provides extensive guidelines for the impeachment process of these officers, these provisions not only need improvement, but they do not apply to constitutional impeachments. This bifurcated impeachment process caused confusion among members of the legislature as well as Texas citizens because of the attempted application of Chapter 665 to constitutional impeachments. The insufficiencies in statutory impeachment guidelines and the lack of procedures for constitutional impeachment was evidenced during that 2023 process. SJR 68 proposes a constitutional amendment to address these issues and implement new provisions governing impeachment. Most significantly, SJR 68 creates a new constitutional provision under Article 15, Section 7, which would authorize the legislature to enact general laws to implement Article 15 or other constitutional provisions providing for the impeachment, trial, and removal from office or disqualification of any officer of the state. Article 15 of the Texas Constitution currently provides an overview of impeachment in Texas. However, it only applies to certain statewide elected officials and lacks procedural guidelines on conducting the impeachment process. This amendment would ensure that the legislature can implement general laws governing impeachment, including but not limiting to guidelines for House and Senate procedures when conducting an impeachment investigation and/or trial. Clarifying and implementing procedures for impeachment will provide future legislators more guidance on the process. SJR 68 also ensures that an impeached officer who is suspended from their duties will maintain their ordinary pay during the pendency of the impeachment. This would more closely align with state and federal impeachment, wherein an official is not stripped of benefits and pay until they are convicted. Lastly, Article 15 permits the governor to make a provisional appointment to fill the vacancy of an impeached officer. However, there are no prohibitions relating to the appointment when the governor is the impeached officer in Article 15. SJR 68 reaffirms Article 4, Section 16 of the state constitution, that the lieutenant governor will assume the duties of the governor during the absence or impeachment of the governor. This clarifies any questions as to whether the governor can appoint his or own temporary replacement. With that, Mr. President, I move suspension.
Any objection? Hearing none. The motion is adopted. The rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading SJR 68. Secretary, read the caption.
SJR 68, proposing a constitutional amendment to clarify and implement certain provisions governing the impeachment, trial, removal from office, and disqualification of public officers.
You recognize passage to engrossment.
Move passage to engrossment, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado Bettencourt.
31 ayes, no nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays out SJR 68 on third reading and final passage. Secretary, read the caption.
SJR 68, proposing a constitutional amendment to clarify and implement certain provisions governing the impeachment, trial, removal from office, and disqualification of public officers.
You recognize on final.
Move final passage, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Betancourt, Birdwell.
21 ayes and no nays. You never thought it'd be that easy, right?
Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Senator Birdwell, you recognize suspend the regular order of business. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2051, the enabling legislation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I move to suspend the regular order of business and take up and consider the committee substitute Senate Bill 2051. Members, this is the enabling language for the constitutional amendment that we just passed. Members, committee substitute Senate Bill 2051 amends current statutory provisions regulating impeachment in the following ways. First, the bill would require that all witness testimony in an impeachment proceeding be given under oath and in front of members of the investigating committee. This provision applies to both the House and the Senate proceedings during the trial. Secondly, to ensure that House members have a reasonable amount of time to review impeachment materials prior to deliberating or voting, this bill requires any committee investigating impeachment provide House members at least 72 hours to review all materials and evidence provided by the investigating committee prior to floor deliberation, followed by 72 hours between the conclusion of floor deliberation and the final vote. This provides members the opportunity to fully review all materials and aspects of the proceeding prior to the floor debate in the House and prior to the floor vote in the House. Members, I took several things into consideration regarding the next amendment to impeachment law, including our 2023 impeachment, Article 3 of the Texas Constitution, and the impact this change could have on future impeachments. Article 3, Section 22 states that, quote, a member who has a personal or private interest in any measure or bill proposed or pending before the legislature shall disclose the fact to the House of which he is a member and shall not vote thereon, end quote. In the 2023 impeachment, it was self-evident that one of our fellow senators was in the first degree of affinity of the impeached officer. What I've tried to contemplate with this portion of the bill is situations where conflict of interest is not as self-evident as within the first degree of consanguinity or affinity, but rather extended familiar relations, such as a parent, grandparent, or in-laws. As a result, I made the decision because a future impeachment might have another familiar relationship that may not be as expressly direct as a spouse or a child. Under this provision, any family member within the third degree of consanguinity or affinity, such as a parent, sibling, aunt, sister, brother-in-law, is ineligible to vote in an impeachment proceeding. Adding this provision to impeachment law alleviates the rise of the issue in future impeachment proceedings and gives clarity for what is beyond the first degree of consanguinity. Members, Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2051 also requires both the House and Senate to keep an accounting of all costs incurred of an impeachment proceeding. The cost shall be compiled into a report and submitted to the state agencies by the 60th day following the conclusion of impeachment. This provision's purpose is simply to record the accounting of any future impeachment proceedings, but it is not designed to serve as a wedge to preclude a future legislature from considering impeachment. Members, the bill also adds a regulatory provision regarding the impeachment of the governor or the lieutenant governor. Members, after my analysis of current law, my intention with this provision is to address concerns that could arise due to the ambiguity of current law. I contemplated the possible, not necessarily the probable, of various situations where clarity regarding the presiding officer would be beneficial. Current law allows the lieutenant governor to sit as the presiding officer over a court of impeachment. Possible future scenarios of which I believe clarity is beneficial is a governor's impeachment in which the lieutenant governor serves as the governor but could possibly also serve as the presiding officer. The lieutenant governor's impeachment and where the president pro tem could serve as a presiding officer and also vote in the impeachment. To eliminate any possible undue influence in future impeachment proceedings, this amendment would require that the presiding officer for the impeachment of the governor or the lieutenant governor be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, or if they recuse or any other or is otherwise unavailable, then the presiding judge of the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals shall preside. If either recused, they are otherwise unavailable, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court shall assign a former appellate judge to be the presiding officer. Members, before I continue with the bill layout, I do have a friendly amendment from Senator Huffman that will add some clarity to this and some other options that I think makes this bill much better than the option that I laid out here in front of you. Lastly, this bill addresses the prior term doctrine, also commonly known as the forgiveness doctrine, which is found in Chapter 665 of the Government Code. Under current statute, an officer cannot be removed for an act committed before the officer's election to office. The issue with this interpretation is that it could protect an elected official who committed an act in their prior term as an elected official before their re-election or election to a new office. For example, if an elected official is a state representative and is later elected to a statewide office, they can still be held accountable in an impeachment proceeding in their newly elected position for acts committed while they were a state representative. I mentioned previously, the primary purpose of impeachment is to protect the state, not punish the offender. As such, even if information comes to light after a new election cycle, every elected officer should be held accountable for acts committed while they held a public office. SB 2051 addresses this conflict to ensure that an officer is subject to removal for an act they committed while holding any elected or appointed office, regardless of the number of times they've been re-elected. The bill also ensures that in an impeachment proceeding, the accused may attend and testify before the House Investigating Committee with the presence of counsel. However, the accused may not be compelled to attend or testify before the House Investigating Committee. While the accused counsel may be present, the provision does not permit the accused counsel to cross-examine other witnesses testifying before the House Investigative Committee. Members, I have a clarifying amendment relating to the status of a divorced spouse. Senator Hall asked a great question in committee, so I've got the answer with an amendment that addresses that. And then again, Senator Huffman will have a friendly amendment on who presides from the judicial branch if the governor or lieutenant governor is the impeached official. With that, Mr. President, I know it was long, but it was appropriate. I move suspension of the regular order of business.
Senator Huffman, for what purpose?
Permission to question the author.
Do you yield?
Yes, Mr. President, I yield.
Senator Birdwell, just a couple of questions. I think this is a great piece of legislation. I believe you and I served on the Rules Committee for the impeachment along with several other senators. And would you agree? Can you hear me? Because
I'm having trouble here.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Would you agree that as we went through that process in the Rules Committee, that it was very difficult in many situations because we were looking through archaic, transcripts literally from decades and decades ago, sometimes conflicting law and not a lot of guidance?
That is correct.
Because it had been so long. Is that correct?
I would concur with that statement. Yes, ma'am. The last statewide impeachment was a century ago.
And so something like this will prove, I think, very useful and very valuable. God forbid there has to be a future impeachment at some point for really anyone who could be constitutionally impeached. You cover all the basics with this, correct?
Yes, ma'am, because as you heard in the layout for this bill, part of the confusion caused among the citizens of the state is they were going to Chapter 665, which covers statutory impeachment, not constitutional. What I do with my catch-all in this bill, in the enabling language, is now there's no difference between a statutory and a constitutional impeachment. Impeachment is impeachment, but under the previous impeachment that we went through, people were holding the legislature or the expectation of the legislature that we would apply Chapter 665 with the forgiveness doctrine and other things to a constitutional impeachment, which it's not supposed to be applied to. So that was part of the reason why you had such a wide variety of media reaction to how the legislature dealt with impeachment. There were those that said this was an illegal impeachment. Maybe not the best way it was done, but what we did last session was not an illegal impeachment because the misreading and misapplication of which sections of either the state constitution or state statute.
Would you agree that also the reforms that you have made in this legislation, which would address what the House would have to go through, the formalities that they would have to go to, the rights that they would have to give to the accused or whoever they were trying to impeach, would provide for a much more robust due process to the accused than what we saw back in 23.
I would absolutely agree. Yes, ma'am.
And was that part of the intent of this legislation to do
Yes,
that
ma'am.
as well?
It was very much so. That way, the efficacy of procedures in the House and the efficacy of procedures in the Senate would, with these changes, lead to the statement that the accused was given a fair trial to respond, and that due process was fulfilled in the spirit of the manner in which the United States and Texas adheres to due process.
But the bill would still provide for an appropriate trial in the Senate if all the other safeguard had been met up front. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct, yes.
All right. Thank
Yes,
you
ma'am.
very much for answering my questions.
You're welcome. Thank you. And thank you for all your help. You were my security blanket during the committee work that we did back in 2023.
Senator Johnson, what purpose?
Question to the bill author.
Do you yield?
Yes, Mr. President, I yield.
Friendly question, Senator Birdwell. Very much admire your work on this and your leadership during the impeachment trial. I want to highlight one element and ask if you think it has a quality about it that you haven't discussed yet here on the floor. By reinforcing the credibility of the impeachment proceedings in the House, do you think also it could strengthen the integrity of the proceedings here in this chamber? In other words, if people don't have faith in the impeachment proceedings in the House, it could distract this chamber and impair its ability to objectively fulfill its duties in the trial phase.
I agree with that statement. May I give a little bit of an example of my personal experience? And look, I'm a big boy, I can take it. But because of the public perception of the lack of efficacy in the House proceedings, and when the governor named me the chair of the committee, some of the calls I was getting, not just from my district, but state, out of district, across the state, were pretty vile, because some of those conversations viewed us as putting the stamp of approval on the House's process. When the Constitution says that the Senate shall receive the charges, meaning that we were compelled to have the trial.
And you and I know that the obligation of the Senate to conduct a fair trial is completely separate and apart from whether or not the House conducted itself properly. But the point here is that with your bill, with it sketching out some procedures that are far less assailable than what prevailed last time around,
that is correct.
There is greater public faith in what happens here in this phase, and therefore we have less of this effect of the public telling the Senate, never mind conducting a fair trial, what happened in the House was a travesty, because we have to do our job no matter what. And if people believe in the integrity of the House proceedings, it makes it easier for us in the Senate to do ours.
That's
for
correct.
that reason, I very much appreciate the work you've done here.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Well.
The Secretary will call the roll. Or any objections? Hearing none. The motion, or rather, rules are suspended. Chair lays out second reading. Committee Substitute for Senate Bill 2051. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2051 relating to the impeachment or removal from office of certain public officers.
The following amendment, members. The Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment Number 1 by Birdwell.
Senator Birdwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this amendment clarifies the provision relating to ineligibility of a member to vote in an impeachment proceeding. Under current law, two individuals are related to each other by affinity if they are married to each other, or the spouse of one of the individuals is related by consanguinity to the other individual. The ending of a marriage by divorce or the death of a spouse ends relationships by affinity created by that marriage unless a child of that marriage is living, in which case the marriage is considered to continue as long as a child of that marriage lives. As such, former spouses with no children would end the relationship of affinity. The amendment clarifies that the ineligibility of a member to vote not only applies when a member is related within the third degree of consanguinity or affinity to the officer subject to impeachment, but also when the member is the former spouse of the officer, regardless of whether children exist from that marriage or not. I move adoption, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. Following amendment. Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor Amendment number 2 by Huffman.
Senator Huffman.
Thank you. Members, under Section 665029 of the bill, it currently states that if both the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and the presiding judge of the Court of Criminal Appeals recuse themselves or are otherwise unavailable, then the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court assigns a former appellate judge to preside in a trial of the governor or lieutenant governor. This amendment would change it from a former appellate judge to then the third step would be the Chief Justice of the 15th Court of Appeals. That is also a statewide elected position. So after conferring with Senator Birdwell, we agreed that that would be a more appropriate person. If for some reason the 15th Court Chief Justice also recused themselves or were unavailable, then in addition, and again, as Senator Birdwell said, we're not looking at the probable, we're looking at in some remote possibility. But if that were to occur, we would want it to be set up. So if they did recuse themselves or were unavailable, a current or former appellate judge is chosen by the Senate. So it's still the Senate choosing from a list of 5 current or former appellate judges submitted by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And I believe it is acceptable to the author. I move adoption.
Senator Birdwell.
It's acceptable to the author. Thank you for your work, Senator Huffman, and helping me make this a better bill. Thank you, ma'am.
Any objection? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. You're recognized passage to engrossment.
Move passage to engrossment, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passes to engrossment. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So moved, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt,
31 ayes, no nays. Rule suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Committee substitute for Senate Bill 2051. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2051 relating to the impeachment or removal from office of certain public officers.
You're recognized on final.
Move final passage, Mr. President.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell, Blanco.
31 ayes, no nays. The bill is finally passed.
Mr. President and members.
Thank you for your work on this, and this is a message we want to do the right thing in the future. It's not a criticism of the past, it's an improvement on the past, and we hope our fellow members over in the House will work with us to have the appropriate impeachment procedures moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator West, Senate Bill 217, suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I move to suspend the Senate regular order of business, take up and consider Senate Bill 217. Senate Bill 217 creates the Historical Texas Freedmen Cemetery Designation Program. This is one of several African American history bills that we're considering. This bill is modeled after the Historical Texas Cemeteries Program, which is already in existence and will be put in statute by another bill that we've passed here today. This particular designation program will enable cemeteries that have the graves of freedmen and freedwomen to apply for a designation from the Historical Commission. I move to suspend the regular order of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, the rule is suspended. Chair lays out the second reading, Senate Bill 217. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 217 relating to establishing the Historic Texas Freedmen Cemetery Designation Program.
You're recognized.
Move passage to engrossment.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passed to engrossment. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
So move.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt, Birdwell,
30 ayes, 1 nay. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 217. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 217 relating to establishing the Historic Texas Freedmen Cemetery Designation Program.
You're recognized on final.
Move final passage of Senate Bill 217.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bencourt,
30 ayes, and you couldn't convince them all, 1 nay. Bill is finally passed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, this is the last bill for today. Senator Hinojosa from Hidalgo, you're recognized on the committee substitute for Senate Bill 2949. Suspend the regular order of business.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I move to suspend the regular order of business on Senate Bill 2949. Since 2021, the state has witnessed a significant increase in criminal activities related to motor fuel. Law enforcement have reported incidents of crude oil and fuel thefts, as well as the operation of overweight and off-route fuel trucks, unregulated fuel depots, transloading activities, and falsified transport documentation. These operations pose serious risk to public safety and environmental standards while adversely affecting state commerce. The emergence of a new criminal enterprise can be attributed in part to the influence of organized criminal groups operating on the Mexican side of the border, as well as to inadequate regulation of fuel transfers and depot facilities within Texas. In this cross-border context, Mexican carriers have engaged in transloading, defined as the illegal transfer of motor fuel, which can occur in various forms, including truck-to-truck, truck-to-tank, and tank-to-truck exchanges. Truck-to-truck transloading often involves transferring fuel to vehicles that have already exceeded the legal weight limit of 125,000 pounds, primarily to minimize the number of trucks exposed to cartel extortion at ports of entry. These transfers frequently occur on unregulated, privately owned agriculture land known as fuel depots that have been deliberately established to evade state oversight. These activities are consistent with a broader criminal practice known in Mexico as hachicol. Hachicol refers to fuel that is stolen and sold on the black market. A related and increasingly prevalent activity is hachicol fiscal, the smuggling of fuel into Mexico without proper declaration to tax and custom authorities. In recent years, Texas has become a staging ground for both forms of illicit activity, with stolen or diverted fuel transported southbound for illegal resale. Criminal networks use fraudulent documentation and unregulated depots near the border to facilitate this trade. The impact of this transnational fuel crime extends beyond enforcement and tax evasions. U.S. energy companies operating in or trading with Mexico have reported significant losses and security risk associated with fuel theft and trafficking. Some companies have withdrawn from high-risk areas or curtailed cross-border fuel shipments due to exposure to hijacking, fraud, and market distortion caused by the availability of untaxed smuggled fuels. These developments threaten the integrity of lawful fuel trade, economic investment, and infrastructure on both sides of the border. Although overweight corridors were designed to facilitate efficient and safe transfers of overweight loads, certain actors have compromised this system by falsifying shipping documents and operating fuel trucks off designated overweight corridors to evade inspection or lower extortion fees. The vehicles used for these illegal activities often include sand tanks and 3-axle trailers that are not equipped to carry hazardous materials, creating significant public safety hazards. These practices not only endanger lives on the road, but also lead to extended damage to our infrastructure. What Senate Bill 2949 seeks to address is these serious concerns by enhancing public safety around fuel transportation and ensuring compliance with the tax code. This bill enhances oversight by requiring expanded shipping documentation, licensing for fuel transporters, and stricter reporting of fuel exports and diversions. It authorizes law enforcement to track vehicles suspected of fuel tax fraud, strengthen penalties for illegal transporting or blending of fuel, and criminalizes hazardous material transported on unauthorized routes. Given the existing tax exemption for gasoline and diesel, the bill closes loopholes by ensuring that exempt fuel exported directly remain unaltered in volume or composition before reaching the destination. Mr. President, I move suspension regular order of business. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any objection? Hearing none, rules are suspended. Chair lays out on second reading committee substitute for Senate Bill 2949. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2949 relating to certain regulations involving motor fuels or other hazardous materials.
The following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 1 by Hinojosa of Hidalgo.
Senator Hinojosa on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, members. This amendment clarifies the term of export to eliminate tax evasion practices that occur at motor fuel depots near the border right before the fuel trucks return to Mexico. And the reason it's important is that the fuel must be exported directly to a foreign country, in this case Mexico, without the volume or composition of being changed or altered to qualify for the exemption. Require a shipping document to include the point at which the fuel will cross the border. It also expands the prohibited conduct subject to civil penalty. With that, Mr. President, I will move adoption.
Any objection? Hearing none, amendment is adopted. The following amendment. Secretary, read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 2 by Hinojosa of Hidalgo.
You're recognized on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President, members. Amendment number 2, it narrows the definition of a motor fuel depot by creating a 3-part exception to include facilities that are part of the bulk transfer terminal system as defined under the tax code, and also facilities that are licensed by the comptroller, and include facilities used solely for lawful activity but not being used to facilitate transloading and tax evasion. Creates a rebuttable presumption in enforcement cases where fuel stored at a depot is presumed to be intended for export if purchased tax-free or ultimately exported. It also removes overlapping or potential redundant criminal offenses. With that, Mr. President, I move adoption.
Members, can we have a little quiet on the floor, behind the rail and on the rail? It's just a little noisy. Senator Eckhart, for what purpose?
To ask friendly questions of the author.
She's asking you friendly questions of the author.
I'll yield.
Are you going to have friendly answers?
I will try. Be accurate.
Senator Eckhart.
Thank you so much, Senator Hinojosa, on this very important bill that is extensive and complex since, of course, as you well know, better than most in the chamber, this touches on federal tax law, state criminal law, federal criminal penalties, international trade. This is a very multi-layered issue. With regard to this second amendment, which I completely support, and we had discussed this previously, does the exception, and I think it does the exception apply to the fuel transloading operations currently at the 2 federally recognized ports of entry?
I do not. The answer is no. And the reason for this is that those ports that are federally recognized do not regulate fuel depots. Fuel depots are the responsibility of the state. The federal government does not preempt the regulation of fuel depots. Any bridge along the border has to be recognized by the federal government, since they have customs and have to check whoever's coming into the country, and also for drug smuggling.
So the transloading facilities that are on the federally recognized properties leased for operation are not covered by this bill?
I do not know of any transloading depot facilities that are recognized by the federal government.
But there are transloading operations on these federally recognized bridge locations that are leased for operation, correct?
No, that's incorrect. What you have is, the fuel depots are located in private property, not in federal property. The federal government has nothing to do with fuel depots. The fuel depots are owned by either private individuals or LLCs that are created, and there may be a front. But the answer is fuel depots are not located in federal recognized federal bridges.
So the bridge companies, if they are operating fuel transloading operations, could qualify under the 3 exemptions in this amendment?
They would not qualify under this exemption if they are in along one of the counties that along the border. And let me tell you the reason why. Right now, any truck, fuel truck that's carrying hazardous material that's at 80,000 pounds can cross the bridge any place they want to. Or even a truck that's overweight at 125,000 pounds going through an overweight corridor can cross at any bridge they want as long as they stay on the overweight corridor. What is happening right now is that you have this companies, fuel depots, where the hazardous loads are taken and they transloaded to either unqualified or trucks that don't qualify and are not safe for the public to minimize the cartel extortion that takes place on the other side of the border. And on this side, because you change the context and you change the volume, you're no longer eligible for a tax exemption to export fuel. So they're avoiding taxes on both sides of the border. One, on the Texas side, because when they picked up that fuel to transport, they did not pay, they were tax exempt. They did not pay a tax. Once you change in those fuel depots, once you change the context and the volume of that fuel, you lose your tax exemption. But what they do is they don't tell the state of Texas, oh, by the way, we changed the fuel volume and we changed also the content. They blend the fuel. So then they are using the shipping documents that they were provided to them by state of Texas, where they picked up the fuel that says 80,000 pounds, but now it may be 125,000. It's a falsified shipping document that's being used to avoid paying their taxes, gasoline taxes here in Texas, that is at 20 cents per gallon, and then going into Mexico using false documentation because it's no longer true that it's 80,000 pounds. So that's what's going on in the fuel depot. Right now, you have some of the companies saying, well, or some of the crossings saying that we're going to lose business. That is not the case. These fuel depots didn't end up being created until about a year and a half ago. A year and a half ago. They weren't there before. Why? Because any truck carrying fuel can cross over at any bridge as long as they were 80,000 pounds. Or if you were 125,000 pounds overweight, you could still cross as long as you stayed on an overweight corridor. But that's no longer the case.
And I agree with all of that. And I believe, if I'm reading this correctly, this amendment in section B3, if it's a transloading facility used solely for lawful activities consistent with this chapter, whether or not it is part of the bridge authority is exempted. So I appreciate this amendment, and I will certainly vote for it. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Eckhart. And I think what it does, it protects legal terminals, which have bulk transport facilities.
Members, any objection to the amendment? Hearing none, the amendment is adopted. Following amendment, Secretary will read the amendment.
Floor amendment number 3 by Birdwell.
Senator Birdwell, what purpose? Explain your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, in Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2949, this offense is tailored to 3-axle vehicles, which is the form of transportation used by Mexican fuel haulers. Based on the discussion in committee, this amendment narrows the application of this offense to vehicles with at least 3 axles transporting hazardous materials in a quantity requiring placarding by a federal regulation issued under the Hazardous Materials Transportation Act. In addition, this amendment clarifies that the offense applies to overweight vehicles with at least 3 axes transporting hazardous materials in 2 situations. 1, when operating on a public highway that is not included in the route designated under the permit, or on a public highway without a permit that exceeds the maximum gross weight by at least 5%. I believe the amendment is acceptable to the author, and thank you, Senator Hinojosa, for working with me on this issue and this bill over the interim and now in session as related to the charge we were given by the Lieutenant Governor.
Yes, the amendment is acceptable.
Any objection? Hearing none, the amendment is acceptable. Adopt it. You're recognized. Pass it to engrossment.
I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, bill passes to engrossment. You're recognized to suspend the constitutional 3-day rule.
I so move.
Secretary will call the roll.
Alvarado, Bancourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes and no nays. The rule is suspended. Chair lays out third reading, final passage, committee substitute for Senate Bill 2949. Secretary, read the caption.
Committee substitute Senate Bill 2949 relating to certain regulations involving motor fuels or other hazardous materials.
Senator Zaffirini, what purpose?
Speak on the bill, Mr. President.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, I rise to speak on Senate Bill 2949. Members, this bill targets unregulated fuel depots that may pose serious threats to public safety, threaten our environment, damage our roads, and facilitate tax evasion and cartel activity, including money laundering. Senate Bill 2949 would equip the state with stronger enforcement tools, such as license suspensions and civil penalties, and establish clear rules for transporting hazardous fuel. It is a timely response to evolving threats and to a meaningful investment in security, safety, and rule of law. The issue of regulating fuel depots in border counties is important to border security, but we must listen to all stakeholders, not only those from the southernmost tip of the border, namely the Valley, but also from Laredo, Del Rio, El Paso, and points in between. I have heard, for example, from Starr County and Laredo constituents who support a reasonable carve-out for fuel facilities located within federally recognized ports of entry, ensuring we protect public safety without disrupting legitimate trade. Some of them worry about the unintended consequences for Senate Bill 2949, including on international commerce and on punishing responsible, law-abiding business persons for the actions of bad actors. Yesterday, I watched the videotape of the hearing for Senate Bill 2949 in the Border Security Committee. Agency representatives and business persons from the Valley testified on the bill. No one testified for or against it. Based on my shared concerns with agency personnel and with Senate colleagues, I will vote for Senate Bill 2949, but my hope is that as it moves through the House, stakeholders from the rest of the 1,250-mile Texas-Mexico border will provide additional insight and strengthen the bill to preclude unintended consequences, if any. Thank you, Senators Hinojosa of Hidalgo and Hinojosa of Nueces, for your leadership in developing this bill. I look forward to joining your team to continue to improve it and to ensure it addresses the needs and interests of the entire border region while precluding unintended consequences. Thank you, Mr. President and members.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Eckhart, speak on the bill.
I rise to speak in support of the bill with concern. There is genuine concern with regard to money laundering, environmental crimes, tax evasion in this particular industry. And this bill does address those things. And it addresses them not just by punishing the driver, but also looking upstream to the trucking facilities as well as the oil and gas industry. And I deeply appreciate that about this bill, and that's why I'm voting for it. But as I mentioned in my questions with regard to the second amendment that went on to the bill, this is a very, very complex area that includes federal taxes, state taxes, taxes in another country, as well as transnational crime and domestic crime. And it also, as we were discussing with Senator Middleton on his impacts study bill, there are both positive and negative impacts in this industry. I remain concerned that some of the positive and lawful impacts of this industry may be unintentionally impacted by the breadth of the bill. I remain concerned that the definitions may capture some law-abiding activity and also may depress some vital income in some of these counties. So I would like us to continue working on this bill with our colleagues in the House to make sure that we have really scrubbed it for any unintended consequence of sucking in otherwise lawful activity. There is commerce to be harvested between our two countries, particularly in light of the fact that the state of Texas is the largest producer of oil and gas, and the state of Mexico has a great demand for that oil and gas. So I look forward to continuing to work on this important issue with our House colleagues, and I will be voting for this bill.
Senator Hinojosa, you're recognized to.
Hidalgo.
Yeah, final passage.
If I may, Mr. President.
You may do anything you'd like.
Okay, if I just need to, I'll point this out. This bill does not impact any legal business that is transporting fuel into Mexico. We did not have these fuel depots in existence a year and a half ago. All of a sudden, they pop them up all over the place. Why? Because the cartels figured out a way to game the system, so they don't have to pay taxes here in Texas. They don't have to pay taxes in Mexico. All these fuel depots are on private land that's leased out to individuals or shell companies. And the transporting of fuel can continue legally into Mexico as long as they go through the proper bridge with the proper weight and not change the context of the fuel. It is not that complicated. The tax law is, but it's not that complicated. And with that, thank you for making this an interim study. We have many challenges along the border, but quite frankly, it's just amazing to me that all of a sudden you have some of the ports come in and complain about they're going to lose money. They're not going to lose money. And we didn't do a carve out for a simple reason that we don't want to put into statute to legalize illegal criminal activity. With that, Mr. President, members, I will move final passage of Committee Substitute Senate Bill 2949.
Secretary, call the roll.
Alvarado, Bettencourt, Birdwell.
31 ayes, no nays. Bill's finally passed. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair announces the signing of the following in the presence of the Senate.
Senate Bill 503.
Following motion to
in writing. Mr. President, the following members hereby request to suspend Senate Rule 7.07B to permit the introduction of bills and resolutions as follows. SB 3049 by Hinojosa Hidalgo, SB 3055 by Middleton and Blanco.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Following bills on first reading in reference to committee, the Secretary will read the bills.
Senate Bill 3048 by Birdwell relating to the creation of the Blue Bonnet Hills Municipal Management District Number 1 to local government. Senate Bill 3049 by Hinojosa Hidalgo relating to the release of a conservation easement burdening the Nueces County Historic Courthouse property to economic development. Senate Bill 3050 by Hughes relating to the creation of the Fannin County Improvement District Number 1 to local government. Senate Bill 3051 by Paxton relating to the creation of the Grassland Municipal Utility District Number 1 of Collin County to local government. Senate Bill 3052 by Parker relating to the powers and duties and validating certain acts and proceedings of the Coal Ranch Improvement District Number 1 of Denton County to local government. Senate Bill 3053 by Parker relating to the powers and duties and validating certain acts and proceedings of the Hunter Ranch Improvement District Number 1 of Denton County to local government. Senate Bill 3055 by Middleton and Blanco relating to the licensing and regulation of advanced practice registered nurses to state affairs.
Following motion in writing. Secretary, read the motion.
Motion in writing. Mr. President, I move suspension of Senate Rule 5.14, the intent calendar rule, in order to move the intent calendar deadline to 4 p.m. today. Motion by Zaffarini.
Any objection? Hearing none. Motion adopted. President's desk is clear. Any announcements? Senator Hancock.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And members, you'll remember we do this every session, and it's the opportunity for the Texas Legislative Medal of Honor nominations. Those are going to be due next Wednesday. Many of you probably have heroes in your district that are quietly at home, but they provided an act of bravery during their service. And this can take place either with the federal military force, and so we want to recognize those that perform these personal acts of bravery and recognize them. We do that, but we need the nominations by next Thursday. And so I would encourage you to get in your district, talk to your VFW, your veterans in your districts, and use this as an opportunity to really recognize somebody who's quietly living at home, but when they were serving our country, that they performed an act of bravery. And it'd be just a great opportunity for your staff to talk to them, let them tell their story. They're probably not telling this story very often. So we'd love to have these recommendations to our office by the 30th, and we'll be sending things to your office as well. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the 24-hour posting rule in accordance with Senate Rules 1110, 1113, and 1118 so that the Committee on State Affairs can meet today, Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025, at Desk 1 at 3:05 p.m. to consider, make that 3:03 p.m. to consider pending business. That's my motion.
Any objection? Hearing none. They can meet at desk number 1. You're very explicit about that. To vote out bills. Senator Hinojosa from Nueces.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, the Senate Committee on Administration will meet in the Betty King Room in 15 minutes, so about 3:18, to take up legislation and to consider the local and uncontested calendar.
Senator Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Members, can we have everybody seated, please?
Thank you,
Senator
Mr.
Parker.
President. Thank you, Mr. President, members. I just want to have a moment to share a horrific tragedy that occurred to a dear, wonderful friend, an incredible Texan, and an amazing family that has suffered horrifically over the weekend, going into Easter Monday. Many of you have met our Denton County Commissioner over the years, Bobby Mitchell. She was here on the floor just a couple weeks ago. Senator Hagenbu and I both recognized her and our county judge. And there truly is not a bigger prayer warrior for Christ anywhere in this state or country than Bobby Mitchell. She's been an amazing public servant, but not only she served people, her fellow Texans every day, in their physical needs, she has served their spiritual needs all of her entire life. And literally, her husband, Fred, was murdered going into Easter Monday morning. Her life is now hanging in the balance, so she's in critical condition. And I just ask for your prayer. I'll ask for a moment of silence here in just a second, but I ask for your prayers for the Mitchell family, that you'll ask the Lord Jesus to protect them and to cover them in his blood. And with that, I just ask you to think about them. And many of you have seen the news stories. It's been a news story that has run all across this state and across the country and around the world. It is absolutely horrific what has occurred. And again, just ask that you be with the Mitchell family, that you'll pray for them. And Mr. President, members, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for Bobby Mitchell, for Fred Mitchell, who lost his life, and for the entire Mitchell family.
Thank you, Senator
Mr.
Parker.
President.
Senator Creighton, did you have a comment? Your light was on. Okay, hold for a second. Senator Creighton, you're recognized. for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, members, I had an announcement. I move to suspend the posting rules to add Senate Bill 784 and Senate Bill 1049 by Senator King to the Education for the Senate Committee on Education K through 16 hearing today, April 22nd at 4 p.m. in E1028.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion adopted. Senator Zaffarini.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we adjourn today, I would like to yield to Senator Chuy Hinojosa for memorial recognition.
Thank you, Dean Severini, and thank you, Mr. President, members. Last Wednesday, April 16th, the Rio Grande Valley mourned the loss of a great leader, a dedicated public servant, and a good family man. Joe Vera passed away at the age of 69. Unexpected. Most recently, Joe served as the Assistant City Manager for Culture, Recreation, and Special Events for the City of McAllen. Prior to that, he held the position of City Manager for the City of Hidalgo. In both roles, Joe was key in spearheading and enhancing many events that brought together families from all across the valley. Events like Borderfest, the McAllen Holiday Parade, the South Pole Illumination Festival, and the McAllen Marathon are just a few examples of a significant contribution to our community. Beyond his professional accomplishments, Joe was a loving family man. He served and he's survived by his wife, Alma Vera, their children, grandchildren, and a wide circle of family and friends who deeply miss him. Today, Joe was laid to rest in Forward, Texas. I extend my condolences to his family, as well to those who have the privilege of working alongside him at the City of McAllen and the City of Hidalgo. If you met Joe Vera, you would see that he was a very positive man, a very happy man, and he always approached his work in a very positive way. And there was not a problem he couldn't serve. In all the years I've known him, I've never seen him upset. I've never seen him angry. He was always trying to find ways to improve the community and make life better for everybody. He's a man that will be missed, and at this time, Mr. President, members, to honor his legacy and the impact he made on our community, I respectfully move that when we adjourn today, we do so in memory and honor of Joe Vera. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Senator Middleton, did you have a quick announcement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Members, in honor of yesterday, which was San Jacinto Day, I wanted to make sure that this body and this chamber recognize the importance, of course, of what is represented right here in this painting. And the title of it is called Retributive Justice. And of course, what it's talking about is a painting over here on the left, where you see William B. Travis on the ramparts right there of the Alamo, where we gave it all for our freedom. And April the 21st is a reminder that freedom is never free. It is paid for in blood right here, and then in Goliad as well, where Colonel Fannin and all of his men were executed. And yet we as Texans, despite all of that and those two losses, persisted, right? The odds were not in our favor. The runaway scrape was happening. Everyday Texans were fleeing. Sam Houston was headed towards the east, away from General Santa Anna's army. And yet, we persisted on that day, represented right there, April the 21st, 1836, San Jacinto Day. So I want to make sure that we remember that day in this chamber and that great victory for our freedoms and the day that our independence was won.
Thank you, Senator. The chair recognizes Dean of the Senate for a highly privileged motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate adjourn until 11 a.m. Wednesday, April 23rd, pending the receipt of committee reports in memory of Joe Vera, constituent of Senator Chuy Hinojosa.
And remember Bobby Mitchell in your prayers, as Dan Parker asked, because she is in critical condition and just an incredible, incredible lady. Tragedy for sure. The Senate will stand adjourned. Any objection? Hearing none, the Senate will stand adjourned until 11 a.m. Wednesday, April 23rd, pending the receipt of committee reports. Thank you, members.